Recording in progress.
I call this meeting of the Greenbelt City Council to order. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Evening. Ms. McKinney? Here. Ms. Pompey? Here. Ms. Pope?
Here.
Ms. Niesel?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Ms. Weaver?
Here.
Mayor Jordan?
I'm here. Hey, please join us as we observe a moment of silent reflection, thinking about several Greenbelt residents and others that have passed away since the last council meeting. These include Paul Ashton's Beavers, Lisa Danielle Jelson, Lee Barron Shields, and former resident Dennis Kevin Dill. Please join us for a moment. Thank you, thank you. Ms. Pope, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
Thank you, Ms. Pope.
You're welcome. My
So
pleasure.
we're joined on the dais for her first council meeting. Amy Niesel. Amy, welcome.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here.
It's great to have you on board. Let's see, we're going to go right now to petitions and requests. We do hold council meetings 2 times a month, except for August. Also work sessions. Our meetings are always open to the public, except for executive sessions, so that residents and others can observe council's deliberations. We always strive to provide a reasonable opportunity for the public to voice opinions on matters being considered. During these times, if you wish to address council or to make a comment or a statement, if you're in the room, raise your hand, and after being recognized, go to the podium. Please state where you live in Greenbelt and your name for the minutes. If you are watching on Zoom, you can use the Q&A tab to submit a question that we'll read, or you can raise your virtual hand and we'll promote you so that you can speak. And if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or the Comcast or Verizon, you can send an email to questions@greenbeltmd.gov. So we're at petitions and requests, and this is an opportunity for anyone to make a statement or to ask a question. So please limit your remarks to 5 minutes and speak on one topic related to the questions under consideration, just one topic. And we ask you to avoid questioning the motives of others. And just in general, if you could be civil in your remarks, we all try and do that our best. So are there any petitions or requests?
There's one online.
Okay. And who might that be?
John Campanile.
Okay, let's go ahead and promote him. Are you there, Jean?
I'm here.
Very good. Welcome.
Turn on my camera.
I think, yeah, because you're not a panelist, you can just speak. It doesn't let you turn on your camera, I'm afraid. If you want to turn on your camera, give me a moment.
Oh, all right. All right.
Okay, John, time's up. No, only kidding.
Okay,
Welcome.
so John Campanile, 15S Laurel Hill Road. And the reason for my popping in tonight, I read about the survey taking place for wayfinding signs. And to cut to the chase, I'd like to know if that could somehow be dovetailed into signage for safety signage for bicyclists and pedestrians, an increase in those signs as well, where people would see signs, share the road, watch out for cyclists, whatever the case might be. And of course, it'll also be true of pedestrians. But as long as we're making these new signs up, I was thinking, I would ask if this could be a part of that project.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. So during petitions and requests, we just take statements. We don't really make comments, but
Okay.
yeah, I think you're on track with something.
That's my
The city
statement.
manager
Okay.
will actually make note of that, and the city clerk, and we'll run it up the flagpole and see what happens.
I appreciate the time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, anybody else online?
Nobody else has their hand up online.
Okay, I see Mr. Orleans back there.
Thank you. Bill Orleans, Greenville resident. First, before I begin, I'd like to make a suggestion. I think for every regular council meeting, and for that matter, work session, we ought to have a meet and greet beforehand so we can have cookies and hors d'oeuvres and cheese and crackers and a minor part of the city's administrative budget, I'm sure. But it would make me happy. Of course, you don't get to do that. In any event, I have lost track again. It's been many months since I actually had the number of days, the number of meetings. I do recall that in one instance, it's well more than a year, when I first raised something with council during petitions of request. And again, there was a response that I received at one point from the former interim city manager. I was not satisfied with that response. It would seem to me that if the city solicitor is going to opine that what council did is fine and dandy, but there remains a question, then at some regular meeting, the city solicitor should be here so that he can engage in colloquy with any residents who might not agree with him. I restate that request. It's been about a year since Ms. Denise Knight from Franklin Park met in a work session with council and said very clearly that Franklin Park had done a survey of the homeless population frequenting Franklin Park. And that survey, the results of that survey, which were vetted, found that most of the homeless population, increased homeless population frequenting Franklin Park, were from outside of Greenbelt. The question was raised that night, and she emphasized that it was vetted information. I have asked in the past for the city's director of community planning and development to get a copy of that survey, and that council reconsider or consider again having a discussion as to whether or not the information in that survey were entirely accurate. I look forward to the coming work session with Franklin Park Management, and maybe we can go into it again. There's one other item that I've been raising more recently, and that is council's action in closed session appropriating city money, city's taxpayer money, to provide a bonus for the previous interim city manager. I have no objections necessarily to any staff getting bonuses. I think appropriations for that purpose should be done in open session. I may have, in fact, some questions of whether or not this particular bonus was deserved, but who am I to say? However, it is very much in my right to say that council has no authority to appropriate money for any purpose in closed session. And I'm asking again for a statute that you might rely on that allows you to do that. You did it inappropriately, you did it illegally, one might suggest, and I await an appropriate response to that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other petitions or requests? Yeah, I want to make a note that the city clerk and the city manager and administration regularly review petitions and requests, and they maintain a log and they provide responses. And in some cases, the response is that no further action should be taken. So if you have a question about a petition or request, I would advise that you actually take a look in the city manager's report, in the petitions and request log, and you'll very often, almost always, find the answer there. So if there are no further petitions or requests, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. And that would be the consent agenda. If any modifications to the consent agenda? Actually, I do have one. I would like to pull the outreach report off of the consent agenda because I want to talk about it a little bit. What's the number on that? Is that number 22, 23? Everybody have that handy?
I'm not sure which one.
It's like
25?
25.
Approval ARPA outreach communication?
Yes.
That's number 25.
Yes. So I'd like to move that we if there are no other modifications, I'd like to move that we adopt the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And at this time, are there any modifications to the agenda itself? And if there are none, I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda as modified.
Second.
Okay? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries as well. Thank you so much. And that's going to move us to the presentation section of the agenda. And I don't know if you know this, but it is American Heart Month. And that's a time that's recognized annually during February. And I do have a proclamation in recognition of American Heart Month to present. And I believe we have someone online. It's Davian Percy, who's the Vice President of Government Relations from Luminous Health Doctors Hospital, is online. So I'm going to stand up and read this proclamation. Whereas February is American Heart Month, a time when all people can focus on their cardiovascular health, and whereas American Heart Month has been celebrated as a way to educate Americans to join the battle against heart disease ever since 1963, and whereas cardiovascular disease is the world's #1 cause of death, killing over 700,000 people each year, and whereas nearly half of all American adults have at least one major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, from heart attacks and strokes to high blood pressure, the threat of cardiovascular disease touches almost every family in our nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Anthony Jordan, by the authority vested in me by the residents and the City Council of Greenbelt, do hereby proclaim February as American Heart Month in the City of Greenbelt, to raise public awareness of heart disease and to take extra care of our heart health. So there you have it. Let's see, Mr. Percy, are you online?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Well, welcome to our meeting here. And you know, Luminous Healthcare, Doctors Hospital in particular, have such a large impact on our community health. And I know that there are many, many programs that go on year-round to help educate the public about cardiovascular health, about strokes, and so many other things. But I appreciate the fact that you've come on tonight to talk a little bit about Heart Month and maybe some of the activities that are going on, special activities this month. So welcome.
Yes, thank you. And Mayor Jordan and members of the council, thank you so much for recognizing us today. On behalf of Deneen Richmond, the president of Luminous Health Doctors Community Medical Center, thank you for the opportunity. She apologizes that she couldn't be here today due to some scheduling conflicts. If you all follow us online or subscribe to our newsletters, you may have seen this week that we celebrated Heart Month internally with our staff on Wear Red Day just last week, where many of our staff members from both of our campuses wore red in celebration of Heart Month. And then also we kicked off, and if you don't have this information, we'll make sure that you get it. You know, part of protecting your heart is ensuring that your blood pressure is in line, getting your diabetes and cholesterol screenings. So last week we kicked off a series of community screenings that are happening right on the campus of Doctors Community Medical Center in our North Building. Our first one was last Wednesday at from 10 a.m. to 2. Our next one will be February 21st, same time from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we have two more occurring that we're pushing into March, on March 6th and March 20th. On the first floor of our North Building, you'll be able to go right in just for a few minutes and get your blood pressure checked, get screenings for diabetes and cholesterol, and get some important information about maintaining a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet. So we encourage the citizens of Greenbelt to stop by somewhat of your neighborhood hospital since we're right here. And please get the screenings. Mr. Mayor, I'll make sure that you get the flyer. You and the members of the council and the administrator get the information so that you can get it out to your residents. And we hope that you all could come out and encourage your constituents to come out and get their blood pressure checked and get their various screenings for diabetes, cholesterol, etc. So thank you all again for allowing us to be here. Again, Deneen wishes she could be here, but she had a scheduling conflict today. But we'll make sure that we arrange a time for her to be there soon.
Hey, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the information, and the fact that I believe there's some additional screenings that are coming up. I mean, we have screenings year round, and the relationship between the city and Luminous Doctors Hospital is so close. I mean, you're literally right there. So you mentioned that these are in the north building. Is that the building where you come in, the main entrance? The cafeteria is near there also. I promise I'll come in for a screening, but I won't stop for bacon and eggs or anything in the morning on my way. Maybe it's okay to do that.
Well, I will tell you that is the correct building, but I also tell you that we have a new executive chef in our cafeteria, so you may be tempted to stop by. And the food is good and quite healthy as well. So it's one of the best hospital cafeterias I've had in a long time.
Well, it sounds great. Yeah. Hey, and how is parking up there? I know there's some shifts and whatnot. So you just come up the hill, and you would turn left to park. Or I guess the best place is in the structured parking right there at the foot of the hill. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be the best place. If there's parking available, that's the most expedient place to park. Otherwise, you would go up the hill and make the left. But most people, when they come into the campus, they go up that hill and they park over there on the left-hand side. So that's often pretty congested. So if you can park in a parking deck there, just to your immediate right, that would be appropriate.
Fantastic. I'm going to mail this proclamation to you, and I'm going to come up and get my cholesterol, and I'll be able to get some extra steps in as I head and stop off at the cafeteria before I get the screening. That way I'll get the steps in also. I'm shooting for at least...
Well, you may want to get the screening before you go to the cafeteria, because your levels will be elevated after you eat.
Good point.
You may
I
want
guess
to hand deliver that and
No, seriously, I guess you should fast before you do cholesterol, right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your coming on tonight, and happy American Heart Month.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the members of the council and the residents of Greenbelt. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So let's move on. The next section that we need to cover are several executive sessions that we've had recently.
In accordance with the General Provisions Article, Section 306C2 of the Annotated Code of the Public General Laws of Maryland, I move that the minutes of tonight's meeting reflect that council met in closed session on Thursday, January 8th, 2024 at 10:03 p.m. in council chambers. Council held this closed meeting in accordance with Section C-3-305B8 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of the Public General Laws of Maryland to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The purpose of this meeting was to receive a briefing related to code enforcement actions at Charlestown North. Votes to close the session: Ms. McKinney, yes; Ms. Pompey, yes; Ms. Pope, yes; Mr. Roberts, yes; Ms. Weaver, yes; Mayor Jordan, yes. The following staff members were in attendance: Josue Samaron, City Manager; Jason Deloach, City Solicitor; Terry Ruby, Director of Planning. Council took no actions during this session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Pope has seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Or Madam Clerk, can you do the roll call, please?
Ms. McKinney?
Yes.
Ms. Pompey?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Nielsen?
Yes.
Roberts? Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay.
I have
And
to
we got
scroll
more.
down to the next one, yes. In accordance with the General Provisions Article, Section 306C2 of the Annotated Code of Public General Laws of Maryland, I move that the minutes of tonight's meeting reflect that council met in closed session on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024 at 9:16 p.m. in council chambers, 25 Crescent Road. Council held this closed meeting in accordance with Section 3-305B1 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of the Public General Laws of Maryland to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction. The purpose of this meeting was to address and discuss confidential and sensitive information related to personnel acquired during the diversity, equity, and inclusion focus groups. The vote to close the session, Ms. McKinney, yes. Ms. Pompey, yes. Ms. Pope, yes. Mr. Roberts, no. Ms. Weaver, yes. Mayor Jordan, yes. Staff members in attendance, Josue Salmaron, City Manager, and Dwayne Martinez, Human Resources Director. Others in attendance were Rena Doyle and Gail Watts, Privacy Consultants. Council took no action during this session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Pompey has seconded. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. McKinney? Yes. Ms. Pompey?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Nielsen?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts? Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
That motion carries. Thank you. Now on to 8C.
In accordance with the General Provisions Article, Sections 306C2 of the Annotated Code of Public General Laws of Maryland, I move that the minutes of tonight's meeting reflect that Council met in closed session on Wednesday, January 24th, 2024 at 7:24 p.m. in the Library of the Municipal Building, 25 Crescent Road. Council held this closed meeting in accordance with Section 3-305B1 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of the Public General Laws of Maryland to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction. The purpose of this closed session was to discuss candidate qualifications for an appointment to council to fill the current vacancy. Votes to close session, Ms. McKinney, yes. Ms. Pompey, yes. Ms. Pope, yes. Mr. Roberts, no. Ms. Weaver, yes. Mayor Jordan, yes. Staff members in attendance, Jason Deloach, City Solicitor, via phone from 8:26 to 8:34 p.m. No other individuals were in attendance. Council took no action during this session.
Second.
Ms. Pope is seconded. Madam Clerk?
Ms. McKinney?
Yes.
Ms. Pompey?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Nielsen?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts? Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Well, thank you, and onward and upward to 8D. Here we come.
In accordance with the General Provisions Article, Section 3-06C2 of the Annotated Code of Public General Laws of Maryland, I move that the minutes of tonight's meeting reflect that Council met in closed session on Monday, January 29th, 2024 at 10:34 p.m. in the Council Chambers of the Municipal Building, 25 Crescent Road. Council held this closed meeting in accordance with Section 3-305B1, 3, 7, and 8 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of the Public General Laws of Maryland. 1, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction. 2, to consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters directly related thereto. 3, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter. And 4, to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss personnel matters related to specific individuals, a potential property acquisition, a discussion of pending litigation, and receiving updates on legal matters. Votes to close this session, Ms. McKinney, yes. Ms. Pompey, yes. Ms. Pope, yes. Mr. Roberts, no. Ms. Niesel, yes. Ms. Weaver, yes. Mayor Jordan, yes. Staff members in attendance, Josue Salmaron, City Manager, and Jason Deloach, City Solicitor, online. No other individuals were in attendance. Council took no action during this session.
Councilmember Niesel, this is your opportunity, your second.
Second.
Oh, man. That had a ring to it. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. McKinney? Yes. Ms. Pompey?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Niesel? Mr. Roberts? Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There's a lot of things going on in the city, so there's a lot of executive sessions. Well, let's go ahead and move to item number 9, which is administrative reports. City Manager Salmaron, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. It's a
Okay.
great day today.
You got some information for us?
Oh, we've been busy. We've been busy. So I've got a couple of highlights to point to. There's a more comprehensive report in your packet, but I want to highlight some of our successes. We had a very successful business conference on Wednesday with over 120 people in attendance. These are businesses in our community. Following the business conference, we had a tour of the CCI Ora Glen Health Facility, which is a 50,000 square foot health facility being built right here in Greenbelt. It's going to host 16 dental offices, 60 examination rooms, and a training facility for up to 300 individuals. So that's a great project that's happening here in Greenbelt. The Gale program in our CARES division has the Washington Adventist University Students started their new rotation, so this means in-home nursing visits have started. We have a total of 32 residents receiving in-home visits, and that's head-to-toe assessments. We, as promised, last week, we took a walk of the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center. We identified some top priority items. Thank you, Amy, for joining us that walkthrough. And so we're gonna follow up on the request from Coach Kays and others in the community, address some immediate needs, and put a plan for long-term improvements on the facility. I also want to report that we've had a First Amendment training with 91 personnel in attendance. This is a way of us improving our customer service ability in the organization to be able to properly respond to all citizens that come into our office for buildings, to our buildings for services, or just to observe. And finally, you would have read in the newspaper that Charleston North Apartments, that formal foreclosure and receivership filings have been made. So we're working through that process in the courts, but that's the latest on Charleston North Apartments, and I'll take your questions.
It's so unfortunate, but just getting this in the courts is the only way that move forward. Hey, just two things that I wanted to ask about. First, in regard to the First Amendment training, if there's an opportunity if it was recorded, or if there's an opportunity for council to get a look at that, it would be helpful. I've actually seen some videos of mayors and other municipalities in Maryland that have been confronted with a First Amendment auditor and didn't handle it as well with best practices. And I want to make sure that I'm not the next mayor on YouTube.
I think as if it
You're
is,
already on YouTube, but you don't want to be in a negative way on YouTube. You want to keep it positive, yeah?
think of it as customer service part of the work, but certainly yes, we can provide training specifically for council members as it's a particular role that you have.
Right. And I also mentioned to you the idea of, since we have so many new council members and it's been a while, maybe some sort of a table exercise or something with the police department, as on just security and
Security,
yeah.
Yes.
in-house.
Yes, we have talked about it briefly in the past. I'll make sure we get that scheduled. Safety and security training while at council meetings, and also when you're about in the community. You are very active and you're out and about in the community quite frequently.
Appreciate that. And the final thing I wanted to mention, Spellman Overpass, it needs a little bit of love. I was walking across today, and just there's too much debris sort of behind the fence on both sides. So I'm wondering, perhaps I'd be willing to work with Public Works or other council members or whatever to get out there one day and do a little cleanup. And maybe we can get some of the Roosevelt High School students. I know their honor society is very active in doing volunteer work. But
Those seniors need their service hours.
Service hours.
They want to graduate, so.
and Miss Councilmember McKinney, I know you have a garden over there, so you probably see a little bit,
Lots of students walking by every day.
Right. And that was something else. There's the path that's partially paved that goes back there, but I've noticed there's a more informal opening pathway that's open, and that didn't used to be there, and it was sort of just having it so open. It's tempting, I guess, for people to cut through or cut back there. So
It is.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of movement.
Yeah.
And then I also have seen, especially at that playground at the
Yes.
part at the top of Garden Way, during school hours, there seems to be a lot of kids hanging out there.
Yes, and
kind of hard to actually distinguish between just people and students, but now that everybody has the clear backpacks, you know. Yeah. Hey,
Mr. Mayor, on this Spellman overpass, the easiest thing for us would be to just have it cleaned, but it sounds like you might want to have a community event around this.
yeah, I'd kind of like to do that. Yeah.
A community event, okay. So I will get with Kevin and the team about
Here
a
he is.
community
He's
event. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We might have to wait a little while because it's a little cold and wet, but yeah, I think we'll be able to manage. Hey, other thoughts or concerns or comments from council for the city manager? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, we got an email through, I think it looked like a very wide distribution list, but it looks like the city of Hyattsville hosts Narcan trainings monthly. And I wonder if we're advertising that, widely, because it doesn't specify who can sign up, but it does seem like that's I think it came to a huge list in lots of other municipalities.
received it, yes.
Yeah, so
We
I just wonder
received
if
it.
that's something we might be able to promote a little bit more, depending on, it doesn't specify who's eligible, but
I did receive that email and I forwarded it on internally. But yeah, it was not obvious to me that it was a public training event with no Narcan application.
Okay.
But we'll ask the team to look into it for
Yeah,
the next one.
just if it
it's
is
a public
public,
event, yes.
yeah, to maybe promote it. And even if it's just intended to be for municipal staff, then there might be some folks that could be, just make sure everybody has that training that needs it, especially as we're thinking about, getting into some of the summer activities and things going on.
And some of those people that need it is, it might feel uncomfortable to a lot of us to think of teenagers getting the training, but oftentimes they're the ones who also need it because they're the closest to when these incidents happen. And
Well, and there was I don't remember if it was MML or NLC, but one of the keynotes was someone talking about like some programs done specifically with teenagers to get them Narcan training because they're perhaps the most likely to be where it's needed at the right time, which is unfortunate, but if we can get them the resources they need to do something about it, that I think that could be very.
that's the most important part, yes.
Yeah. The other couple of things. So one thing I was thinking about is the Franklin Park work session that we have coming up. Have we considered, now that we have some of that equipment for being able to do hybrid sessions other places, have we considered whether to do that in Greenbelt West? Obviously not the gym, because the acoustics in the gym clearly were not very good, but either the game room or maybe even, I've been told that the leasing office has a large space that might, if we could bring in chairs. Is that something you've looked at?
We didn't look at the space specifically, but it's something I wanted to bring up in the meetings portion of our meeting because Amy expressed interest, Councilmember Niso expressed interest in this topic of taking, as council had indicated at previous meetings that it wanted to be in the community. Would this be an opportunity to be in the community? Mayor Jordan today, we discussed certain workshops taking place in the community. And one of the priority sessions that council wants to schedule is accessibility for residents, and accessibility physically, but also for our council meetings. And so we thought about having that work session happen in the community. So we are talking about how do we have better engagement out in the community with work sessions. So we've had that conversation. We haven't specifically selected a site or made a short list of where we would host meetings. In this afternoon's discussion, as we were talking about accessibility, we were looking at not just the digital accessibility and for the hearing impaired and other barriers, but we also talked about geographic locations. There's spaces in the central Greenbelt, historic Greenbelt, where we could facilitate meetings. One that's very common for us has been the multipurpose room in the community center. But when thinking of accessibility, we also want to think about geographic location. So perhaps having meetings on the west and on the east side will make sense for those work sessions. So in the coming days or weeks, we can start vetting spaces that are suitable for us to hold listening sessions, town hall, and work sessions. And the criteria for us would be, one, acoustics, because we need amplified sound. The wireless signal penetration. We want a place that we can take our hotspots and be able to connect to the internet because so many folks connect to us via Facebook and YouTube online and Zoom. And the third piece would be the space allocation. Is there suitable space? Does it have enough seating for number of people expect? That's our short list on our criteria. If there's more items that you want to consider, parking, walkability, or bike parking, please send them our way and we can start looking at spaces that meet that criteria.
And even thinking about, I know that there even spaces possibly in Beltway Plaza Mall might be some spaces that would meet some of those needs. as well, if we could work with them. That's another
I
thought.
was looking in the audience for Shaymar. Shaymar's got a ton of space. Oh, Nirvan and Bob are here, so there's space in Bellway Plaza.
I think they have stuff going on Wednesdays, so I don't know if that works for next week, because I think it's the keyboard and ukulele on Wednesdays, although maybe that's done by the time of our work session time. Yeah, so that might be. So there would be another possibility. It just seems like Franklin Park is one that might be a logical one to try to hold somewhere that people in that neighborhood could walk to, for example.
And we had it in the leasing
Yeah,
office
it
before,
it
you know,
seemed-
by the main lease, and so there's quite some space in there. We've done that a few times in there.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but you know, we used to before COVID, we would only have council meetings here, and all of our work sessions would actually be on the second floor of the community building, and then we decided to move them around to different parts of the city. So anytime we had a work session with Franklin Park, we would go over
Yes.
to the playroom, not to the auditorium.
Right,
The acoustics are terrible.
Yeah, the acoustics are really bad in there. That's just not.
This Ruby remembers, don't you?
Yeah.
The other two small things that I wanted to ask about, because we had on the consent agenda the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, their report, and there were a couple of things that I confess I meant to walk up there, but some things that came up that seemed like easy to take care of were the safety strips on the steps by the library. I haven't looked at those to see if that got taken care of. There was like some of them had like torn up, I think, a little bit. On some of the lower steps, that was something very specific that got brought up in those meetings. And then there were also, they also listed some very specific traffic concern areas. Just wanted to make sure that Ms. Ruby had looked at that too. And it might be helpful. I know there's a whole list of places where speed studies and other things are happening as well. It might be helpful if we saw that list, because I know I get resident questions about that, and also some of the, I need to go back and look at some of the list of the ARPA funded pedestrian and bike improvements to be able to, a little bit more off the top of my head, be able to tell people where those are actually happening. But specifically, those couple of things jumped out: the traffic concern areas and the safety strips on the library out of that Senior Citizen Advisory Committee report.
I will follow up on those things. On the traffic study reports, we will submit that at the next council report, the list of all the sites that are being studied as part of this traffic study plan. Then we'll submit the list of the bike pad projects that are being funded as approved by council.
And I know that list exists. I just keep, I mean, that does already exist as a list.
It
I
does,
just have
yes.
to go look at it, and
Right.
that's partially on me. So.
And for the benefit of the public, we'll include that list in part of the council packet, so that anyone who wants a copy of it will be available in the packet.
I feel like that's a pretty common question from people, so making that reasonably accessible would be good.
On the library step strips, I'll check with the team. I walked it 2 weeks or so ago, and we inspected them ahead of the winter event that we had, and they were in good condition then. I think there might have been one or two that were somehow damaged, which is natural that they just wear and tear, they get damaged, but I'll look into that.
And it may already have been taken care of. I also have not gone back over there to look, but I remember that coming up, so.
Councilmember Poe.
So just in, to the safety strips on the stairs. Now, that's been an ongoing issue with, that the seniors have brought up numerous times over the years. And I think something was done on the inside. They wanted some kind of reflective strip so you can see it when you walk down or up. Some non-slip, something. And I know that Public Works has done something, I believe, on the inside last year. But I'm not sure how far they got on the outside, or if they just didn't find the correct material to do that. But I think that's where they were going for, something that you can see, when it's darker, especially in fall, winter. So that's where that was going, just so you know.
Okay, appreciate the feedback.
Okay, any other comments, inquiries from council? If not, let's go ahead and move on to item number 11, which is a contract for a broadband feasibility study. The proposal came forward at the last council meeting. We asked for a little bit more information. The city has considered the possibility of building a broadband fiber network to provide internet service to citizens and businesses and to facilitate city initiatives. A major part of the due diligence process is to determine if the project would be feasible and financially supported. The city issued a RFP, a request for proposals, for a feasibility study for a broadband fiber network, and that RFP resulted in 4 proposals being submitted. The pricing of the proposals ranged from $27,000 to $445,000. Staff is recommending the proposal from Mission Critical Partners with a cost of $114,597. Dale Worley, who is our Director of IT Services, is here. And Dale, Mr. Worley, welcome. It's nice to have you with us tonight.
Good evening. Thank you.
So at the last council meeting, we were looking at the proposal, and there were some questions just wanting to know a little bit more about the process and the deliverables. And so you were able to submit a couple of documents, but do you want to talk or share some documents to help us make
Frankly,
this
I've
decision?
got Brian Melser from Mission Critical Partners and his team online. They're probably better able to speak to their process than I am.
Okay, well, welcome, MCP. It's nice to have you with us tonight, Mr. Mercer. And
Thank you.
yeah, so there were some questions. We just wanted to get a better sense of how the project would be implemented and what the timeline would be and the deliverables, just getting a better sense, because what we were looking at just didn't really didn't flesh things out quite so much. And so we really appreciate the fact that you're here tonight to talk with us. I know that several council members had questions.
Sure,
Councilman-
sure. And thank you for having us, and, to the committee that selected us, thank you for making that recommendation. We do have a very brief presentation that kind of walks through that. If I'm okay to share my screen, I just wanted to check first.
Give it a try, see what happens. I think you're okay.
All right, let's see here.
It's looking good.
Okay, very good. So thank you to council and the mayor and everyone there. Mr. Worley's been great to work with so far, and he conveyed that you wanted us to kind of step through this. So I will just get right into it. They'll introduce myself. My name is Brian Melser. I'm a client services director with Mission Critical Partners, and Maryland is part of the territory that I cover. I'm out of the Pittsburgh area, Pennsylvania. Also with me, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a little bit here, is Scott Neal, who's a senior vice president here with MCP, and he oversees our wireless and court technology systems division. And then lastly, I also have Andrew Cohill here. Design9 is the partner that MCP has worked with on several broadband projects, but proposed with on your project as well. And Andrew is going to primarily do the bulk of the stepping through the process, and both him and Scott will be able to answer a lot of your questions.
Well, thank you. Please proceed.
Yep, absolutely. So, and just real briefly, who is Mission Critical Partners? Mission Critical Partners started as a consulting firm. We're in our 15th year. We have grown. As you can see, I won't read everything on the screen. However, Mission Critical Partners is focused in the public sector. Primarily, we do public safety and justice related work. And as previously mentioned, we started off and still do a lot of consulting, professional services, and we've grown into a managed services firm. As you can see, we've worked all across the country. We've done several projects in your area, whether they be public safety or public sector. And we've also done a lot of broadband projects, and several of which that we have partnered with Design9 as well. And Scott and Andrew are going to get into that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and maybe he can introduce himself and then Design9.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Neal. As Brian stated, I'm a senior vice president at Mission Critical Partners here. Amongst other things, I happen to lead the broadband services that we generally provide. I'll be serving on this project as the overall project manager, but I want to, without further ado, introduce our broadband expert and his team, Andrew Cohill, and I'll let Andrew tell you a little bit about himself here in a second. And Andrew can talk to you about who Design 9 is, and then he can also step through the process we're going to go through for the broadband study for Greenbelt. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the time this evening. We're looking forward to helping Greenbelt develop more affordable and higher performance broadband throughout the community. We work primarily with municipal governments on broadband. I've been helping governments with broadband, and Design 9 has been helping for more than 25 years. We have worked in Pennsylvania and Virginia. We've done some work in Western Maryland. I was actually born and lived in Baltimore, and have also lived in Salisbury, Maryland. So I know the Baltimore area, Greenbelt area very well. I had a friend who lived in Greenbelt for a while, so I'm looking forward to a visit recently. And let's go to the next slide. So I just very quickly, this is the primary tasks that we've been asked to do. We will do a community-wide survey that will include a mailing to all residential households. We will have both an online business and an online residential survey that people can fill out. And the mailing that we'll do to residential households will actually have the survey on the mailing itself. And if for some reason people have trouble using the internet or don't have internet access, they will be able to just simply fill out the one-page survey on paper and mail it back. So we're going to try to be inclusive about making sure as many people in the community are able to participate. We'll be looking at what kinds of assets, telecommunications assets, are in the community right now, wireless and fiber. We'll be looking at what's going to be needed, and we'll be using the survey data to help inform some of the decisions and recommendations that we'll be making. We will look at what it would cost to actually build a network throughout the city to develop high-speed access to every home and business and institution in the city. We will also look at partnership options. We generally do not recommend that the municipal government itself becomes an internet service provider. Instead, we usually try to look at what existing and nearby internet service providers might make good partners, and try to assess some of their interest in a city-led project. Again, we would not likely be recommending that the city become an internet service provider and actually compete with the private sector. We think the city's role is one to facilitate improvements in broadband, but not to become necessarily an internet provider. And then finally, we'll be looking at financing and legal considerations, making sure this meets both state and federal requirements, and looking at capital costs and operational costs, and governance and oversight. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we expect this will take 4 to 5 months. We're ready to start as soon as the city's ready, and we would kick it off with some meetings in the city, tour of the city with city staff, and beginning to meet with stakeholders. And we would also do the business and residential survey very early in the process, with the idea that we could get that out to people either near the end of the first month of this process or early in the second month. And that's next slide. I think that's all we had. I'm happy to take questions, and I know Scott will take questions as well.
Hey, thank you very much. That was very, very informative. So I think we do have a few questions. Just to kick things off, so Design 9 would actually be doing the study under the rubric of mission critical partners?
Yes.
Okay, and so the timeline and everything else would be delivered by Design 9, correct?
Yes, we'll be working closely with MCP, and I'm sure we're going to be using some of their staff and expertise as well.
Okay, Councilmember McKinney.
Good evening. Thank you so much for putting this together and answering our request for getting some more detail around this. Just a couple of questions, and this may be a combination question for Mr. Worley, our city manager, about just getting stakeholder engagement and communication. I'm just wondering what the plan is to ensure that we have a comprehensive communication plan for those groups and that it is including a wide range. We're looking at accessibility, we're looking at language, just making sure that everyone can be included and knows about that in advance. So in looking at the timeline, we may want to add some time in month 1 to ensure that we're doing some good outreach before the actual event happens when we're trying to hold those focus groups or stakeholder engagement. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I would like to ask Andrew and Scott, who are on the leading the project, what is their strategy for outreach, particularly with the individuals that are most affected by the digital divide? Because that's the key to one of the primary reasons why local governments are looking at broadband expansion is to get at reducing that digital divide. So, Andrew, what are you proposing?
Sure. We generally use a combination of traditional media and social media. We find Facebook is very effective in getting the word out, but we will also want to try to generate some local press in the local media, radio stations, newspaper articles, perhaps TV coverage if we can get a local TV station to do a short story. So we'll be looking at a variety of venues and avenues to make sure people are aware this is going on and helping them understand how they can participate.
Maybe we can run some ads on Comcast and Verizon. Maybe not. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I think related to that, because I do think the survey, some of the information looked like it would be very interesting to have. You commented on some of the things, I mean, some demographics, but also like work from home questions, internet use questions, which I think would be, very interesting to get some information. But it looks like you only actually expect 7% to 10% of households. That's usually your response rate. Am I reading that correctly in the proposal?
It varies from community to community. We have, these kinds of surveys. It depends on the topic and the time of year, but 3 or 4% is considered very good. We're usually able to get, as I say, anywhere between 7 and 10%. We have gotten as high as 20% participation in some communities. So it certainly the outreach is very important, and we have a lot of tools in our toolkit to get the word out. But the primary approach we found, and we've been doing this for many years, is a direct mail. We use the Postal Service Every Door direct mail. It's very inexpensive. We typically mail out. It's an 8.5 by 11 flat on heavy cardstock. One side has a place for information, often a message from the mayor or the town or city council, and information about why the city is doing this, and then the survey questions are on the other side. And so the data, we're usually able to get a good response.
And do you do that? Is that just English only, or do you do bilingual surveys?
We have done in the past a Spanish version as well. We do that online, and we'll, on the mailer, we will have a link to both the English and the Spanish version. Most people fill it out online. They'll get the mailer, they'll see the link, we put a QR code on it. and they can go to either the Spanish or the English version and fill it out.
So I think one of the things we have traditionally had a problem in Greenbelt specifically is that there's sort of three sections of the city, and we tend to hear the most from the historic section in the center. And so I think something we'd hope you might be able to look at as you're getting those survey responses to make sure that we're getting, based on addresses, and staff can help you with that, make sure we're getting information from all parts of the city. We also later on the agenda have some citizens who brought forth a proposal about some outreach related specifically to our American Rescue Plan Act, but I'm thinking ahead that I wonder if some of this could be incorporated as part of the work they're doing to reach some of those people. Again, as Mr. Salmaron said, some of the people that are the hardest to get to and maybe the least likely to respond to a survey. So maybe we can work on making sure we do some of those very intentional things to get a broad spectrum of responses. The only other thing that, the other thing, I think you answered one of my questions about the purpose of it being, is it that, the city start providing service to everybody, but it sounds like really working with a different organization to be the ISP. The other kind of small question I was curious about is, you mentioned some of the GIS and asset mapping, specifically looking at like road layouts, public buildings and things. And there was also, I think, a mention of a GIS layer of existing fiber, broadband, electronics, and so on. But are you also able to, if you're doing some surveys of some of those general things, I mean, maybe we already have some of those GIS layers, but if you're doing a survey of that as those structures and the broader things, is that something that could also be made available? Because I feel like some of that stuff could be really useful for some other projects if it's being updated, because even if we have some of that information at the city, if it hasn't been updated with I mean, there's not that many new buildings, but some of those new features and things. But would all of the GIS layers and all of that data that you collect about the city be available to us to use for potentially for other projects after this?
Absolutely. All of the data we collect, we will make available to the city, including all the survey data. And with respect to your concern about reaching all homes in the city, again, we'll do a mailing to every single residence, and we do geolocate every single response. So as the response come in, and we've done this many times, we will immediately start mapping where the responses are coming from. And if we see there's certain areas where the response is low, we'll work with the city to try to get the word out, to try to encourage people to respond. So absolutely, we'll share all of the data we'll collect. Will be given to the city at the end of the project.
Excellent, thank you.
Hey, I have just a couple of quick questions. So just in terms of the financial feasibility of this kind of a project in the study, is it typically more dependent on the residential side of things, or is it adoption by the businesses that makes this kind of initiative feasible?
If you want to do a community-wide network and connect most homes and businesses, the residential connections do contribute a majority of the revenue in any kind of partnership or collaborative with an ISP. So the residential connections are very important. Business is also very important, but the residential connections, again, are typically a very significant percentage of whatever revenue is generated by the network.
And on the residential side, we're a community with a lot of multi-family homes. We've got some single-family homes. We have townhouses. So when you're the infrastructure that's required to actually come up with this kind of a network and for it to be financially feasible, to what extent is that also dependent on working with the management companies to put infrastructure on the buildings as opposed to individuals adopting?
You've hit on something very important. It will, on MDUs, multi-dwelling units, apartment buildings, townhomes. It is their private property, the HOAs and the management companies do have to be involved in the effort. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge. It's just that our community, Greenbelt's very much a community of cooperatives and HOAs and condo associations. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, just a follow-up question, because I realize we haven't heard, so Mr. Salmaron, in his previous position in Yellow Springs, you went through a similar process to this. And I just wonder, does this fit with sort of what Yellow Springs did and what you see as being most effective for Greenbelt?
It does not, and I have a question for Andrew. Andrew, you introduced a topic that you would not be proposing that the local government become the ISP. If so, what is the preference, or what is the model that you guys tend to operate or recommend?
Well, we look at all options. I said we generally don't recommend that, but I'm not categorically saying that's not something we're going to look at. We will look at both a city-owned and operated network and a collaboration between the city and the private sector. Some communities today are pursuing what's called the open access model. And the way I like to explain it is, if you think about roads as a transport system, what we're talking about now is a digital transport system. Communities and local governments build roads. They don't own the businesses that deliver the services and over those roads. So you can either have there's several business models. One is the city becomes the owner and operator of the network and the ISP, but it's also possible for the city to own the network, but to have a private sector internet provider actually sell the services, and they would pay a fair portion of their revenue to the city to cover the cost, perhaps both the cost of the capital of building it and operating it. So there's a number of models. We'll be looking at all of those and be working with city staff and to help you understand what are the pros and cons of each of those models, and why might you pick one over another.
I must have misheard you. I heard you that you would not be recommending that the local government become the ISP. The concern I have with the open access model, while the word says open, it doesn't specifically address net neutrality and privacy principles.
Actually, the open access model has net neutrality built in. Every single provider on an open access network is treated exactly the same way. They get exactly the same throughput. It's actually very favorable towards net neutrality, and we look forward to talking to you about that.
Now, you mentioned the provider. That's who are actually handling the traffic for the customer. How does it? What policies are put in place to ensure that the providers that the fiber is being leased to can ensure net neutrality on the endpoint, on the customer end?
That's a very straightforward contract issue. The ISP signs it. If the city built a network and wanted competitive internet for citizens and businesses, the contract is structured to make sure that the ISPs follow the rules that the city wants to put in place. Mm-hmm. Very straightforward.
But ultimately, it's a relationship and trust issue. We're leaving it up to the commercial operator to adhere to the contract obligations.
Well, there's a couple of ways to operate it, but the city, either directly or indirectly, is going to be managing the transport layer of the network, and will have visibility into everything that the ISPs are doing. Okay. We'll look at both models. We generally don't recommend the city become an ISP, but if that's something that interests the city, we've helped communities pursue that model, and again, we'll walk through the advantages and disadvantages of each of those approaches.
My understanding from council is not that it's specifically looking to be an ISP, but doesn't want to be put in a box. you don't want to eliminate an option without exploring it. And initially, you introduced it as not recommending that as a possibility. So, got the sense that it was being ruled out before you
No,
had a chance to look at it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to convey that at all. We will look fairly at every single business model and option.
I appreciate that. So these questions are some of the questions council was sort of wondering about when we initially looked at the proposal. So I think this discussion has been helpful. The funding for this is actually going to come out of American Rescue Plan funding as a way to enhance communication and strengthen the community by providing better access to information. And that net neutrality piece is also very, very important to us. So the proposal, it's we've got the proposal. The recommendation is for mission critical partners at a cost of $114,597. They're recommending that we approve this this contract, which it looks like it's a signed PDF. At least that's what it says here. But let's go ahead. Would someone like to make the motion? Or
If I may, just final words, Mr. Mayor. In a previous meeting, council asked me what was our experience in executing broadband in Ohio. And I mentioned that my team ended up working against a feasibility study. Feasibility study had some bias built into the model. Also, it considered underlying economic conditions pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic has really shifted where folks are in using internet service. It's shifted the value of net neutrality and privacy principles. So I think should council approve this project, we would monitor this closely to ensure that bias that have typically made their way in feasibility studies don't get factored in.
Thank you. Would the council member like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that we recommend to accept the proposal from Mission Critical Partners with, for a cost of $114,597.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, please. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone
Opposed?
opposed?
No.
No.
No? Okay. The motion does carry. Thank you. Hey, Mr. Worley, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you always going to ignore questions on the floor before you vote, Mr.
Sir, please. So let's move on to item number 12. And MCP, thank you so much for your good work on this project. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. We look forward to getting started and working with all of you to get this moving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 12 on the agenda, Maryland Sustainable Communities Program Renewal Application. The memorandum is from staff member Fear, and I'll just share this. The Maryland Sustainable Communities Program is led by the Department of Maryland, Department of Housing and Community Development. Okay.
Somebody's mic.
Yeah.
So the Maryland Sustainable Communities Program is led by the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, the MDHCD, and the entire city was first designated a sustainable community in 2014. The intent of the program is to provide communities with the framework for promoting environmentally, economically, and socially responsible growth and development. Designation as a sustainable community is required for a community to be eligible for certain state grant programs, such as the Community Legacy Funding. The city's renewal application is due Monday, February 19, 2024. The renewal application is intended to provide the state with a brief summary report on the progress made towards meeting the desired sustainability outcomes outlined in the city's 2019 Sustainable Community Action Plan, as well as an updated action plan that looks ahead over the next 5 years. Due to the President's Day holiday on Monday, February 19, 2024, Staff plans to submit the renewal application by the end of the day, Friday, February 16th, 2024. A submittal letter with the mayor's signature is required to accompany the application, so staff recommends council approve the submittal of the renewal application to the state on Friday. Ms. Fear, welcome. It's nice to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit, or do you have a presentation on the Maryland Sustainable Communities Program and our
I don't have a
application?
presentation on it. I can do a little bit of an overview of the application. I know it was very long. I know it was very long because we've been working on it for a while.
We appreciate that. I think so the criteria changes a bit. So what's different this time around?
They actually simplified the application this time around, believe it or not. So over the last several months, staff has been working to complete the attached renewal application that you have. It is still in draft form. I actually found a couple typos today and caught them and fixed those. We relied on meetings with staff from various departments and a review of multiple community planning documents and efforts across the city that have occurred in the last 5 years, but that also informed previous applications as well. We presented a draft of the renewal application to the Advisory Planning Board at their January 17th meeting for review and feedback. And the application really just represents a snapshot. Even though it is long, there's a lot that could go into it that probably isn't in there. It's a snapshot of what the city has accomplished since its last renewal in 2019. We were first designated in 2014. As you mentioned from the agenda comments, the renewal is due now every 5 years. So this will be our second renewal from when we were first designated in 2014 with the resolution. It includes an overview of our outlined accomplishments from the previous action plan. It includes some of the previous action plan challenges that we were unable to accomplish, a snapshot of our competitive funding that we have received, not including ARPA funding, over the last 5 years, including funds that are designated or we're eligible for because of the Sustainable Communities designation. And then includes a new action plan, which does carry over some components from the previous action plan. So some of the outlined accomplishments that we talk about in the application are in economic development, environmental sustainability, and multimodal transportation across the city. Some of our three previous action plan challenges that we highlighted were the construction of the WMATA Trail at Greenbelt Station, the installation of gateway and wayfinding signage, and an increase in affordable housing opportunities, which actually remains as one of our action plan goals. And the competitive funding over the last 5 years, as I mentioned, excluding ARPA, exceeds about $9.5 million. So that was a nice amount to add up and look at and see what funding we've gone for and received. And so the action plan itself, the elements to that are the environment, the economy, transportation, housing, community health and quality of life, and local planning and staffing capacity. And I want to say those last two are slightly different. They overlap with the previous action plan, but they're slightly different in their terminology and definitions. And so we've created a draft action plan again with the feedback of other staff members and all of those planning documents, as well as the APB.
Okay, so as far as feedback or comments from the Advisory Planning Board, what sorts of issues or thoughts did they share with you?
They thought it was pretty comprehensive. They were curious, I think, just about a bit about whether some of so in the action plan, what the action plan calls for, and it's pretty literal in what it calls for, are a list of strengths and weaknesses in that subject area. So for example, in environment or economy, what we see as the city's strengths, what we see as the city's weaknesses, desired outcomes and progress measures. And really those desired outcomes, I would say, are what we're listing as goals for the action plan. And the progress measures are fairly quantitative. APB was hopeful that they would be a little more qualitative, but I did outline that it doesn't appear that that's necessarily what DHCD is looking for. Not that we couldn't add some of those, but I think we have to have some quantitative measures to look back on when we think ahead to our renewal application that will happen in 5 years from now. The strategies and action items, they seemed satisfied with those. They were wondering if some of those, could be listed in a hierarchical manner, which I didn't change necessarily. These aren't in any specific order. None of the strategies and action items are considered more important than the other. I think they all work together under each outcome. And then they had some feedback on some implementation partners that we already added to the draft before you saw it.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And with this process, we've had this certification for a while, and I believe Sustainable Maryland is actually based over in College Park at the University of Maryland, or they were, or they're not.
So it is very
Oh, that's right. They
confusing.
were changing that.
We have Sustainable Maryland Certified, which Public Works has worked on and recently got their renewal designation. It's very confusing. That one is the one that is located out of College Park, out of the University of Maryland.
Okay,
It's
got
one
it.
of the partners. There is a lot of overlap, and so it was, I thank your team, because we were able to look at that application to get some insight. And we also had a meeting with staff to help inform, especially the sustainability, the environment section of our action plan. This one is Sustainable Communities, which is run out of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, and then opens us up to the option of applying for different funds, including community legacy, some bike ped funding, things like that across the state.
Got it. What I was going to ask is, did you get any feedback from them directly about our application or about things that we could be doing more of? Or less
They
of?
did not. We did have a call just to go over how to fill out this new application and the feedback they took to simplify the application. There was a much longer, actually quantitative, or maybe it was a qualitative section. There was a lot more narrative, believe it or not, in the previous renewal application, and it probably was pretty redundant and not necessarily useful for filling out then grant applications later.
Okay, thanks so much. Any council questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, it was very interesting to read this. I know it was a lot, but there's so many good things in here that it was nice to kind of see it all in one place, actually. I appreciated that. And I just wondered if, and this is more of a general comment, not about this specifically, but it seems like so much information was collected here, touching so many parts of the cities, that I just want to make sure that we look at what we listed here as our plans and those are incorporated into the MBOs. And also, I was thinking about some of these ideas would have been useful to have, like even in our council retreat when we were talking about goals and strategies. And just I think we need to remember this when we're going to the next session. Doing that is we do all these things and we send them off. And I know it, and it would be good to remember them when we're trying to come up with our plans for council. It's not as long as 5 years, right? We're trying to think about this term and what do we do for this next term. So no, I thought it was great to see it all in one place, and see so many things covering so many different areas. So it clearly was a lot of work, but it was interesting to read. So thank you.
Thank you. We did refer a lot to the MBOs over the past 5 years. So those are
I think just like
extremely
working with
useful.
each other, like it seems like it should be a back and forth sort of thing there. And I sent a couple of very small comments that I noticed that maybe are already typos you already noted, but I just sent you you and Terry an email with a couple of things that I noticed.
Thank you.
Yeah, council member.
It's very similar to what Mayor Pro Tem Weaver said, but this was just clearly an incredible amount of work went into this. And I personally just, as a council member, took so much value from it. And, this is definitely a document that I'll be referring back to. I love seeing what our strengths are here. I love seeing even our weaknesses, because that tells us like what we can do better as we're planning and moving forward. Like Mayor Pro Tem said, for these next term, the things that we can do. So I think this is an excellent program, and I really appreciate how hard you guys have worked on this. So great job.
Thank you.
Okay, comments from the public? Let's see, is this an action item? Are we going to vote on this or is it a briefing? Yes, because somebody please make a motion about, there's a comment from the public. Please, sir.
No, I have to go back up after you.
Bill Orleans Greenbelt. For the record, I would suggest to all members of council, I believe if you'll check Treasury's ARPA, the use of ARPA monies under Treasury, when there's a vote to appropriate certainly over $100,000, but almost, I think if I remember correctly, any substantial amount of money, the public is to be heard. Each of you members of council, old or new, cannot permit the public to be ignored when you're expending money under certain regulations.
Okay, are you going to comment on this
Yes,
question?
I'm going to in a minute.
Okay, well, please.
You should
Please
reconsider
go
how
ahead,
you
sir.
vote when you vote. Under housing, I hadn't quite got to this page yet, but an earlier page as it relates to housing in seeking the sustainable certification stresses that the county has no facility for Greenbelt to increase its affordable housing base. However, the city has an option. Before it endorses to the county any application from a private developer to build housing, the city can, it has the authority to do it if it chooses to do it, can request of the developer a certain set aside for affordable housing. In the last 10 years, including Greenbelt Station, there have been 4 housing developments in Greenbelt. In neither of those instances has the city requested a set aside for affordable and for an affordable element. Greenbelt Station, Motiva, Beltway Plaza, which is stalled for some reason. I'm looking for a report on that at some point, and the nursing home site. Those are 4 housing developments. The city has endorsed all 4. Not one of them has it been requested by the city to include an affordable element. So when the city suggests in order to receive the certification, which no doubt it will, that it's doing everything it can, the city is lying.
Thank you, thank you. I would disagree strongly with some of your assertions here. Ms. Vera, please. And also, we do need a motion if someone would like to make that.
I'll move, should I move before is this Ms.
Yeah, that's
You're
fine.
going to
We'll do
speak?
that.
Okay. I recommend that council, that we approve the submittal of the renewal application to the state for sustainable.
Ms. Pope is seconded. Ms. Vera, did you have something else?
I do not. I'm just waiting for your.
Well, let's take the vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion does carry. Thank you so much for your work on this.
So there
Ms.
is a
Ruby.
signature letter, and we'll send that out in the next day or two. Thank you.
Well, that's going to bring us to item number 12. 13, I'm sorry. Approval of legislative support. At the January 22nd, 2024 council meeting, the City Council authorized the city manager to pursue proposals from consulting firms specializing in legislative advocacy. The objective is to enhance the city's capacity to influence legislative outcomes in favor of our legislative priorities and the interest of our residents. Mr. Samarone has identified Carrington and Associates to provide the city with legislative support. Staff recommends that the council accept the proposal of Carrington and Associates and authorize the city manager to enter into a contract to provide legislative tracking, identifying testimony opportunities, providing weekly updates, and briefing staff and council at a cost not to exceed $24,000 in a year, plus reimbursable expenses. Council approval is sought. Mr. Samarone, I do take a bit of issue just in terms of the direction from council. It was not so much about influencing and advocacy as it was about tracking. And that is clearly stated just in terms of bill tracking, testimonial opportunities, providing weekly updates, and briefing staff and council, which is a real challenge. I was talking to Delegate Williams today, and she mentioned that at the state level, there are more than 3,000 bills that have been introduced. And that doesn't really count, take into consideration all of the bills at the county level and at the federal level. So we've kind of gotten to a point where we really do need some additional support in order just to track and to brief us on these bills. So while I take issue with the way this is worded just a little bit, the intent, though, I think is the same. We just need to have someone in place to help us keep track of this legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize for that. I'm thinking about the city's capacity. I think our voices are very mighty, and certainly our residents' voices are mighty. We just need to focus those voices to the right bills and the right policy issues that we care about and that we want to have the outcome that we desire. Which this is what precisely this contract allows us to do, is to identify those key priority items that we can get in front of and voice our concerns or support for those issues.
Appreciate that. So on the contract itself, the motion or the authorization, we'd be authorizing an annual cap, but the actual proposal is for the contract is for month to month. So if it gets to, is that correct?
The retainer model. So this would be in a retainer model, and we can discuss with the consultant on being on a month to month. The way that we put this RFP out is for the year, which will span several legislation cycles. And the importance of that is to ensure that we're able to follow bills for more than a session, because things may not get on the agenda, but they're likely to come back. When you talk about 3,000 bills being before the state legislator, they might not get to all 3,000 bills. Some are going to get modified, they're going to get tabled, and then may come back. So I think it's important to have this long-range view. An example of that's going to be the maglev project, right? This has been going on for years, and it may go on for several years more. And so we can speak with the consultant about what does the retainer model will look like on a month-to-month. The 24,000 is below the budgeted amount of 30,000 that council had approved in the 2024 budget. But we'll revisit and we can leave room for any modifications to the agreement. We may find that when the consultant presents and as council is getting the feedback on the bills, we may want to adjust something. Maybe have particular targets around writing grants or other things that we might need assistance on, because a lot of legislation oftentimes can lead to financial opportunities for us, and we may need to respond quickly or need particular reports or documents created that we may not have the expertise or capacity, and we may want to leverage that support as well. Which brings me to the Carrington and Associates proposal. While this current contract does not explicitly include grant writing support, that is an option that they have included in their proposal, should we want to use that. Did I answer your question, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, that's helpful. Mm-hmm. And I think as we move forward, if we approve this, it would be very, very helpful at the next council meeting or work session very soon to actually sit as a group and maybe talk and interact with the contractor to make sure that we're all on the same page. Of course, it depends on our schedule, but also, the legislative session is rolling along pretty fast right now. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I had two questions. One is, and maybe this is sort of addressed by what you just commented on, this is under the amount we budgeted, but it does, it's plus reimbursable expenses. And I'm not sure, do we have a sense of what that would be? Would that likely, how much would that be? That seems a little vague to me, and it's not, so.
Absolutely. In this particular, the reimbursement expenses are if we want this individual to go on a meeting on our behalf, we're talking about the mileage reimbursement. If we want them to join a coffee or meet and greet, and requires admission expense or whatnot, that would be a reimbursable expense.
Okay, so we're not talking very significant things.
Right.
Maybe mileage between here and Annapolis or Largo. Okay, but that's my other question, because I noticed in reading this proposal, there was a lot of discussion of Annapolis and less discussion about county council tracking, which I feel like has actually been one of our bigger concerns. Because we do actually, I know, I mean, we unfortunately don't have Jay Davis on the MML legislative committee that was tracking the state legislation, but at least Greg Varda as a staff member is sitting and paying attention to that. But what has actually, I feel like, been harder is tracking the county legislation, and that was not nearly as much as emphasized in this proposal. Is that something that you have talked to Mr. Carrington about? I just want to make sure that we don't get into something that is not fulfilling our full needs in tracking legislation.
This is something I have not had spoken directly with Daryl Carrington about, but I could have that conversation and we could explore what opportunities are there. We received 5 proposals, Tim. So we received 5 proposals and they were very competitive. They're like mini proposals you get. They're sort of on pricing, they range. Certainly there's the Cadillac plan that gives us everything you could want in a proposal. County, state, federal bills.
I don't know if we want we want the electric vehicle, not the Tesla, but some, I don't know, Rivian or something.
Well, after the Super Bowl commercials with Tesla.
The Ford Mach-E, is that something in the middle?
So those are the trade-offs that we're making, right? When there is a $72,000 option that came through, this one in Tim's word, the best value for the city. I don't know, Tim, if you want to add anything else to.
We just felt their proposal really, it gives us a year-long schedule of what they're going to do. And as Josue said, we really wanted to have a team that was going to stay with us. We recognize we're deep into the session now. So we want to be able to continually track these things. And certainly before a contract is signed, we would talk to them about the county legislation. They know that that's a big, important, the RFP that we put out specifies county tracking in multiple places, so they know that is a requirement of the contract. And we have been working with Ingrid Watson's office to get better lead on the bills that they're interested in, but certainly this would be part of the contract that we would talk to them about.
That's helpful. Thank you. So yeah, it is very important that we have the conversation about the county tracking. I think Pratt.
And I would like to add, we expedited this because there's a sense of urgency and we're sort of in the middle of a session. We're going to have our legislative dinner with District 22 representatives on March 20th. So we wanted to bring this to council as fast as possible. If council is able to wait for another meeting, we could schedule to have the consultant come and speak with council at a meeting, and so we can answer some of these questions.
That's sort of why I asked the question about the annual versus the month-to-month, because I do think we need to get started as soon as possible, and I would like to take action now. But I'd also like to talk a little bit more, and I'd like to kind of see how this rolls out with the county piece. I don't know if that's something we can negotiate, maybe make the approval to move ahead definitely for the next couple of months.
That could be a condition that council places on its approval, that you approve with a condition of ensuring that the city staff can ensure that county legislation will be tracked and reported on.
3-month period or something. Just yeah. You think that's feasible?
For a 3-month contract, there's so much capacity and infrastructure that has to be built up for a client that I wouldn't want to restrict ourselves in being able to lose a consultant if they have upfront costs to put in infrastructure for us. Having done consulting work myself, you got to set up a portal for clients and figure out your tools for a client. I'm not trying to. I don't know what Carrington's process is. I just will be mindful of not handicapping ourselves by being restricted for 3 months, because we may need longer to ensure that the relationship works, right? That you're sort of working out the kinks and getting the information that you need.
So as I said, I am interested in moving ahead, but I'm also interested in having those conversations as soon as possible, not just with staff, but also just getting to know Mr. Carrington a little bit. Council member.
I tend to lean more towards I'd rather have conversations with these firms because I feel like it's important how they're going to connect with us and how our working relationship is going to be. I mean, I recognize the importance of us having someone to do this job. I certainly don't have time to track all of the legislation that is going to impact our city. I know the city staff doesn't have that. But my inclination is just like, I just want to know more about who these people are before we're hiring them, because this could be a long-term relationship and it's not something we've ever done before. So I have some hesitations around that.
Councilmember Pope?
Thank you. I mean, I'm ready to move ahead, like Mayor Jordan said. But so this would be for 1 year. What would your suggestion be for, if not 3 months? I know it's very short. I don't think that's feasible. But are you talking 12 months?
The proposal is for a year.
For you. Okay.
For a year. We can look to negotiate a review period, say that we agree to review the contract in 6 months, and we can decide to make an amendment to it or terminate a contract within 6 months.
Okay. Well, that's a good idea. I would go. Okay. Thank you.
And again, we're also open to bringing folks to speak with council if.
Mayor Pro Tem, then Councilmember McKinney.
I just wonder if Tim or Josue, you can address, what would be the consequences of, given that the session is already in full swing, and I think, crossover is in March, which I understand is a pretty significant period. I feel like a lot of the hearings are happening now. What would be the consequences if we waited for another, postponed this for 2 weeks and maybe had Mr. Carrington and his associates come in at the next council meeting? I mean, is that going to be detrimental for what we're trying to do, or is that something that we could?
I wouldn't use the word detrimental. I think there'll be some hearings and some bills that we may not necessarily miss, but we may not be as prepared as we might envision. So, for example, the maglev House Bill 17, I believe there's a hearing on February 22nd. So obviously that's going to happen before next council meeting. There may be other legislations that are a priority that might have to take place without having a consultant in place.
I have been working directly with Delegate Williams on that. We had a strategy call today.
Yeah, I think I'm less worried about the maglev than others, to be honest. I feel like that one we're pretty prepared on. We know what we want to say about that one, but yeah.
That's an example. Had I had more time to prepare, I could probably find something in those 3,000 bills that would be relevant to us.
Councilmember McKinney?
I guess I'm just following up with what Mayor Pro Tem's question is in Councilwoman Pompey. Just understanding a little bit more about this firm. I appreciate that they provided sort of a schedule of what they were going to do, but I tried to go on their website, try to understand who they were as a group, and also understand the successes that they've had. They talked a little bit about in their proposal, but it would also be good for us to get a better understanding of what they understand about Greenbelt. As they're going to be advocating for us. So I get they're very well connected within the county, within the state, but also understanding how they can best advocate for our community, I think is going to be important, and that might come from a conversation. I would be open to thinking if we could have some type of conversation that might be helpful with them.
There's a couple ways we can go about that. One happens at the council meeting. If council is amenable to appointing a few of you, that we could have a meeting without breaking Open Meetings Act. We could facilitate those conversations, sort of a meet and greet.
We're going to talk about meetings a little bit later on. I mean, there's an opening on March the 4th, but I really do feel like there's a lot of legislation that's coming down the pike.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
My preference would be somehow to get the firm on board, but not necessarily commit to a year or half a year. Mayor Pro Tem?
No, I guess I just was trying to get a sense of, we've heard from a few people, but I'm not sure we've heard from everybody, whether they're feeling comfortable moving forward now or would prefer to wait. I mean, we could approve it tonight. I think they might not agree to it if it's not the full year, or at least maybe 6 months. And also just thinking about the timing of the legislative thing, but I'm not sure we've heard from everybody what everybody's thinking, and I think that would be useful to hear. I mean, it'd be a 2-week delay if we waited till the next council meeting and had them come in. It's perhaps a kind of important 2 weeks, so I don't know. I'm not sure where I come down on that, but I'm not sure we've heard from everybody yet.
Yeah. Other comments you guys have?
Sure, I usually listen, but I feel like this would be an important time to jump on this contract. I understand our hesitancy about signing on to a year with an unknown quantity, but they are consultants for us. They should be doing their best to work for us as best they can. And I do feel that 2 weeks, this is a really important 2 weeks legislatively, and I wouldn't want to fall behind farther than we already are. And then we have a lot of ideas about changing things, but we have no idea how that would impact the actual cost on the contract. So if we say we only want to sign on for 6 months, then our vote here would probably be moot, because I'd imagine that would change the price point quite substantially.
Might, but I suspect that we probably could, instead of committing to the whole year, just, to the end of the session, or, I think this kind of contract is about relationships, and usually for a professional service contract like this, that you can back out, if it's not working. And that's the concern, just being able to have the impact on the county level, and also just the rapport. But the firm's pretty well known in the county.
It is.
So, yeah.
I would like to talk about process, because I failed to mention what steps we took to evaluate the proposals. We were looking at overall experience of the firm, qualifications of the project team, the people that are going to be working on this project, their strategic approach and methodology, network and influence, and project cost. From all those categories, relationship is difficult to gauge in any of those things, as it would be with any contract. So, and how we evaluated all the proposals, we gave them a score based on those categories, and we got it down to a recommendation that both Tim and I agreed that they fulfilled the best value for the city. So we had a very good criterion review process, but there are those relationship issues that will be difficult to gauge, and you're all are going to have different experiences with that.
Mr. Roberts?
As far as I'm concerned, it's a waste of $24,000. It's going to be more than that, because the little add-ons that they're going to want are going to push that way up. And I think, we can pay more attention ourselves to the bills that are going on in the state, because there's not that many bills in the state that are affecting us directly. It's not like we have to look at every bill, that goes across the state. So this is another one that, I don't think we need to spend this money on. And so I'm voting against it. And, I haven't heard you all say anything about the federal level. And right now, especially like on the maglev issue, the state's not going to help us at all. If we want to beat that project, we have to beat it down in Washington, D.C., because it's the federal government that controls the land that the maglev wants to use. It's the bark and all that property up there that they want to use. That's what's going to decide whether the maglev goes through or not at the state level. Because if you look at the legislation that's come through the state, it's all worthless. Not going to help us at all. And so, we have experience with this, because you can look at what happened to the ICC. We went down the same road trying to get the state to oppose the ICC, and they shoved it right through right on top of us. So, and the maglev is comparable to that. So, yeah, I'm not voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Councilmember Pompey.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about your process. Did you interview all of the firms or some of the firms, or I'm just wondering what your feel was from them, and if you felt like they were
people who would well represent our city.
We looked at who their clients were. We looked at their references. I've had contact with 3 of them. And those 3 happen to be the top scorers. So we have some, they're not unknown quantities. So just to give you a recap of who they were: Ashler, Carrington, Cornerstone, L.A. Perez, who is the current provider for, legislative support provider for PGCMA, and O'Malley.
I think College Park actually works with O'Malley and Ashler. They've had 2 legislative support firms working with them for several years now. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I think, did
Or is it
you
Ms.
have
Poe?
something?
I just thought that Josue's suggestion with the 6 months and then we reevaluate. I think that was a good suggestion, and I think that would fit maybe what you were talking about. Maybe you didn't want to go for a year, but I thought that was a good compromise that we should maybe pursue. But I do think we should move on this and approve it.
You want to make a motion?
I make the motion that we accept the proposal of Carrington and Associates and authorize city manager to enter in a contract to provide legislative professional services, including but not limited to legislative advocacy, bill legislation, tracking, identifying testimony opportunities, providing weekly updates, briefings, staff and council at a cost not to exceed $24,000 per year, plus reimbursable expenses.
And that's with the provision that the agreement be reviewed at 6 months? Or?
Yeah, as Mr. Samaron just stated, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was going to, would you accept a friendly amendment to include also the caveat that we make sure that they're covering county legislation?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
I would, yes.
Do you have, if we do the review at 6 months, is there some type of review structure? What are you evaluating against?
One, how are they meeting the deliverables as outlined in the request for proposals? So the weekly, biweekly reports, the bill summaries, the identifying opportunities for testimony, and identifying opportunities or bills that are of impact or of interest to Greenbelt. I think those are things that we could very easily check off to say whether they're meeting or not and how satisfactory they are.
I was going to say, and the quality of
Right,
those,
and
not
how-
just that they're turning them in.
Right. How satisfied are we with those things? There could be another level if you have interest of if there's another metrics you want to evaluate.
No, but that would also take into account the support on county legislation or federal.
Correct. That was the second amendment to it.
No, do we actually need a formal second? I'll formally second it.
Some questions?
I think I would feel more amenable to the proposal if we had the firm in sooner rather than later to talk with us about what they're doing and what they're like, how things are going, and just so we could actually meet them and have a small Q&A with them.
Before the contract's approved
No,
or
it doesn't
voted?
have to be
Okay.
before the contract is signed, but soon after the contract is signed, I would like them to
That
come in.
actually, that's a deliverable.
I agree with that. Yeah, I'd like that.
I'm sorry. There would be a kickoff meeting because I think it's important that the consultant understands the interest of the body, so that they could. 3,000 bills is a lot of bills to get to, and to Mr. Roberts' point, a lot of them may have nothing to do with Greenbelt, and so we need to be selective about how do they focus their time. Yes.
And they'll be working under council's direction, under your direction. How do we envision that?
Direction as
say that
contracts,
again?
under my direction as contracts are designed to be.
Wait, it's both to some extent, just as far as the evaluating the quality of the deliverables. I think council would actually, you would be taking your advice from council as far as our impression of the quality and the appropriateness of the deliverables as far as our needs.
Oh,
The city's
certainly,
needs.
certainly. I work at the pleasure of council and at the direction of council.
Okay, let's take some comments. Anybody online?
Haven't seen any hands raised online, no.
In the room, we got Mr. Schachter and Mr. Orleans. Mr. Schachter, please.
Tim reminded me that the introductory sentence and the deliverables is to meet with city council and staff to
There you
have that
go.
kickoff meeting.
Okay. check box.
Leon Schachter, 9B Parkway. Certainly, more information is always better than less. But having said that, I think follow on to some of Mr. Roberts' points are over all the many years that Greenbelt has been in existence and the legislature has been in existence and the county council has been in existence. Have you ever missed the boat? Ever? Have you ever felt like if only we had paid a contractor to help us, we would have known about something important that we knew nothing about? Another question to ask yourselves, it's not just the 7 of you that would track this, but I've heard no mention of the fact that you should be able to rely on your state and county elected representatives to inform you about what is going on. That's one of their primary roles. I wonder how that is working, and that certainly should be one of the bases that if you do go with the contractor, that the contractor consults with those folks regularly to find out what they're doing. That's probably the best source of information about bills that would impact Greenbelt. And then finally, in deciding if you decide that you're going to use a contractor, you certainly want to have checked with whatever municipality they're already working with and get that municipality's opinion as to how it's going. And I would never hire anyone that has no experience with actually working with the municipality. And finally, I forgot to mention this, aren't there other organizations that you already belong to and can rely on for this kind of information, like MML? Don't they track legislation and inform you in their reports as to what's going on?
Well, thank you. Thank you. The answer is yes to almost everything you said. Yes, we are very, very active in the Maryland Municipal League. Jake Davis served on that committee. I co-chaired the statewide committee a few years back. So we are, and we have Greg Varda, who is actually serving on that committee. So we are getting, staff is getting updates. We are working closely with the Prince George's County Municipal Association, PGCMA, but it's just not, it's not enough support. And yes, there have been occasions, particularly with some of the county legislation that bubbles up, where we have been blindsided or not had enough information or an opportunity to really share the point of view of Greenbelters. It happens a lot with GHI and the cooperative. Sometimes legislation is drafted and it's for multifamily developments, but there's no mention of how cooperatives are a little bit different. So, and finally, with all the firms, they're all currently working with other municipalities or other entities. So they are already tracking some or a lot of the bills that we have an interest in. It's a question of volume. It's a question of really getting good briefings. So yes to almost all your questions. Mr. Orleans?
I thank Mr. Schachter. I thank Mr. Roberts. I thank Mr. Jordan for answering honestly that yes, the city, which as it should be, is a member of MML and a member of PGCMA, and it is the obligation which they fulfill of those two organizations to report to their members on the status of legislation in the state as with MML, or the county as it is, as it should be at least with PGCMA. And while I don't know this for a fact, I would not be surprised if there weren't a statewide organization of city managers and city clerks that's affiliated with MML, and city managements around the state should be reporting to the city, respectively, the city manager and the assistant city manager, of what is within their purview as city management. The fact is, while I'm not averse to spending $24,000 on almost anything, I am opposed to it for this thing. Mr. Schachter is absolutely right. Our senator and 3 delegates from the state legislature should be informing not just Greenbelt, but all of the 22nd district municipalities weekly on the status of legislation either they've introduced or they've endorsed and co-sponsoring, or that which might be averse to the District 22 constituency. Ms. Watson should be reporting to Greenbelt and Bowie, which I'm sure she does in any event, and the unincorporated area, the civic associations in Glendale, what is being proposed in Largo that's in their interest, as I presume she does. I do not know, but I presume she does. The question is, why are we going with Darrell Carrington, whom, by the way, I know, I like, likable fellow. I voted for him 18 years ago for county council. But when he was unsuccessful, he elected not to continue seeking elective office. He went into the business of government. And while he's a nice guy, and I'm sure he runs a very effective operation, he's involved in the kind of state apparatus, municipal, county, industrial complex. He makes money by advising, whether it's lobbying for or simply informing various municipalities around the state that he contracts with. In this instance, it would be Greenbelt. But this is information that you should obtain on your own. We don't need to pay a legislative services provider. We should be asking our state delegation, our county council member, we should be asking our state organizations, MML, PGCMA, and whatever state organization exists for city managements, what the status is of legislation, and council should earn its money.
Please, sir, will you tone it down a bit?
It should read those bills, determine for itself whether they're in the interest of Greenbelt or not. And if they're not, they should so advise their delegation and any other relevant member of the state assembly that what they're considering is inappropriate for Greenbelt. I'm opposed to this as much
Yes,
as
thank
I would
you.
be.
Thank you. And yes, we already do that. We just need additional support. Half of our council here is new. There's only, it's just 3,000 bills. So yes, we do get updates from County Council Member Watson, from our at-large County Council members, and certainly from our delegation. Delegate Nicole Williams is very, very good about keeping us in communication, and we are in communication with them. We need additional support. In my opinion, we need additional support, just as most of our sister municipalities have. College Park has 2 firms actually working with them and have had that for a number of years. New Carrollton has folks working with them. I believe Berwyn Heights has a firm is actually working with them. So come on now. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Claudia Jones, Laurel Hill Road. I agree. You do need help. You do need support. 3,000 bills is a lot. And you guys have full-time jobs. So this is a public service position. And you have families and you have full-time jobs. I do agree. And this is a good company. As a kickoff, I think that's great too. What if you would not approve this, then I hope council would recommend to the city manager, who did a lot of work, and the assistant, what kind of options there would be or other suggestions. I don't see this. The city manager's coming to you with a proposal, gave you the proposal, did a lot of work on it. If you didn't approve it, I hope you would have suggestions for the city manager. He just asked for help. You need a helping hand. So I hope you go ahead and you approve this.
Thank you. Any questions or comments online? I don't see any.
I didn't see any online. No.
Yeah. Please, sir.
Nirvan Sengupta, live on East Side. I would love to see this company give us a little blurb that might go into the news review that everyone could read, like an AP wire service type thing, just paragraph, just something digestible for the public. What's happening in Maryland that affects Greenbelt, what's happening in the county that affects Greenbelt, federally too, if you guys want to do that, but a blurb in the news review would be awesome if you could include that. I don't know if it's too late to change the contract or whatever, but that would be awesome.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you. Hey, so item number 14 is directly related. There's a number of bills right now that are in progress that are moving ahead that council needs to weigh in on. And we've got 3 of them in front of us. These are, the process in the past, we are able to review information, a brief summary of the bills, and council can weigh in either by supporting a bill. We can support a bill with an amendment, which we like the idea and we'll support it if X, Y, Z happens, or we can oppose a bill. And so with that in mind, we can, the actions that we can take is we can write a letter of support, or if it's something that's very, very important to council, we can go and testify directly. I was on, as I mentioned, I was talking to Delegate Williams about her maglev bill, which is House Bill 0107. And we have the option of, this bill is cross-filed by Senator Washington earlier, but the House hearing's coming up at 1 o'clock on the 22nd. And I've testified that on the past. So we have the option now that we can testify in person, or we can do it by Zoom. But it's much more impactful to do it in person. It just takes a lot of time. You get there and you don't really know when the bill is going to be heard. So you might actually, the hearing might start at 1 and the bill may not come up until 4 o'clock, and you really don't know until you get down there. So we just have 3 or 4 of these bills highlighted, but the city manager and Assistant City Manager George have already begun compiling information based on what we're getting from PGCMA, what we're getting from MML. And, I've sat and talked, looked over all the legislation that our delegates and senators have filed to just come up with a short list, and we're working to kind of build that out. But as far as the meeting tonight, there are 3 pieces of legislation that we need to make a choice to support with amendment, or to oppose. And the first one is, yes, Ms. Pope.
We have one more option. We sometimes don't.
Oh, yeah, we can also take no position.
No position, right. So we have 3 options.
You're absolutely, Ms. Pope, that is absolutely correct.
I do pay attention.
Now, so often there are bills where we just, either we don't really have a horse in how's that go? A horse in the race. Or maybe it's something that affects some of our sister municipalities, but maybe it doesn't quite affect us quite so much, so we don't really want to take a stand one way or the other. So those are the options, and the first bill is a county-based bill. So our county delegation, which works hand in hand with Montgomery County, would actually be pushing this forward, and that's PGMC, that's for Prince George's in Montgomery County. And the bill is 105-24, Prince George's County, and it's for qualifying municipal corporation land use. And this is an interesting bill because it authorizes a governing body of a qualifying municipal corporation by resolution to exercise the powers of the Prince George's County Planning Board, the zoning hearing examiner for Prince George's County, or the district council for Prince George's County to make specified land use decisions, subjecting the exercise of those powers to the substantive and procedural requirements and standards established in the Prince George's County zoning law, providing for judicial review of certain actions and generally relating to land uses in Prince George's County. So in a nutshell, what this is, and Delegate Marvin Holmes is the person who has introduced this legislation, and it specifically calls out municipalities in Prince George's County that have 15,000 residents or more, which means Bowie, Greenbelt, College Park, and that's pretty much it. Laurel already has its own independent land use authority, and they were grandfathered in because their planning department existed before Prince George's County came into it. So with this bill, Bowie is supporting, and College Park has also drafted a letter of support.
Hyattsville, are they? They're over 50.
No, they're not.
Really? They're not?
I don't believe they are.
Braided Hyattsville.
Interesting.
Well, Hyattsville, when you say Hyattsville, it's sort of like when you say Silver Spring. You don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Well, there's no part of Silver Spring that's incorporated. There at least is an incorporated part of Hyattsville.
There's the post office, Hyattsville, and then there's the municipality, Hyattsville.
I thought they were bigger than 15.
No.
Yeah.
So, Delegate Holmes is, he's amenable to suggestions to improve the legislation. I know that the city manager and assistant city manager and Terry Ruby, our planning director, have all sort of eyeballed this bill. And it doesn't really go all the way in getting us the land use powers that have been one of our legislative priorities for many, many years, but it's a step in the right direction. So my thought is that we should go ahead and send a letter of support. I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, I don't think it's going to pass. But I think that we should send a letter of support, as College Park and Bowie have. Mr. Roberts.
With all due respect, I think this bill is worthless to us. Why don't he put in a bill that will give us planning and zoning authority, if that's what he cares about? Because all this is going to do is set us back years and years. It's going to say, oh, we get to do what the county says do. And no, I'm not signing on to this bill. That's not what I want for my city or my county, for that matter. Because what we have right now, and with a few people in Upper Marlboro controlling all the land in Prince George's County, is not a good system, and it's not a system that's in place anywhere else, even in our country. Small municipalities have their own planning and zoning authority all across the country, and we're being asked to take this. We're being asked to enforce, actually do the work of the county. We're saving them money, and we're getting the raw end of the deal. So I'm not signing on to this. Thank you.
Thanks. It's important to kind of read the whole bill, and it's what you've stated is what you might think just skimming it. But there are some additional powers over parking and signage and a number of things that could benefit us. So I think that we should support Delegate Holmes in this initiative, and maybe it'll work. I don't know, Ms. Pope?
I just wondered if maybe Ms. Ruby or Mr. George can just kind of give us a little synopsis so everybody else knows what this is about.
Yes, thank you. This bill will expand upon the limited zoning that we already currently have. As you know, we have departures from departures from sign design standards, and we have variances. As I read this bill, it will grant us authority to enforce the Prince George's County's zoning code as it relates to detailed site plans with certain exceptions. So I think that it does not require we do it. It provides us an opportunity to do it. And I think if the bill passed, some internal discussions will have to occur amongst us in terms of what does that mean for our review, our ability to negotiate private agreements. Because as you know, we're very successful in negotiating private agreements that are more restrictive than the county zoning ordinance. This bill does not allow us to be more restrictive. We must comply with the zoning ordinance in our enforcement of it. So it's something I think we just would collectively have to talk. I don't think that there's any harm in letting it go forward. In fact, I think that, as indicated, some municipalities, want to see it go forward. We've had much success, unfortunately, in the baby steps, but baby steps are better than going backwards and not going forward, correct? As you know, we've done a great success with our variances and we have departures. We have not accepted all the authority as College Park and Bowie does. A lot of it has to be cost-benefit analysis of what kind of cases we hear and so forth.
So that would be getting our foot in the door and just expanding a little bit more than what we have,
Correct.
right? So it would be it could be beneficial for us because we've been asking for more of this power, right? And we just never get it. So
this is very almost identical to the bill that failed. I think 2009 was the first.
Right.
I want to say it is identical, but
I think it was
very
2000.
close.
Yeah. Okay. So I would be in support that we send a letter in support. Of support.
I'll second that. It's a motion. And thank you, Ms. Ruby, for pointing out it's enabling legislation, so we definitely don't have to do it. It just gives us the
But don't go
power
away,
to do that.
Terry. Hold on.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. So I guess one thought is if it's a small step forward, is that going to mean that it's going to make it harder to keep going because it's sort of the I'm trying to figure out how to describe what I'm thinking properly, but the idea that if we got a little bit and then they'll just say, okay, that's taken care of, and then they won't pay attention to it anymore because it's like, oh, we gave them some more authority. We don't need to worry about it anymore. I mean, is there a risk of that?
That has not been our experience. We first got
Okay.
departures and variances, then we got special exceptions and non-conforming and vacation right away. This time would be detailed site plans. I agree that the likelihood of it passing is challenging. The county is very opposed to these municipalities taking on detailed site plan and so forth. So I don't see it as harmful to our goal. I think the state legislators know exactly what we would like at the end of the day, but they're working within the framework that they have in the system to at least try to get us there slowly.
Now, one specific question, because I noticed that it says the district council may delegate to the governing body of a municipal corporation the powers of the district council regarding, and then it has a list of things, but it doesn't, so it says they may delegate, but that, I mean, enabling is though, I mean, that's slightly different because it doesn't say they have to delegate it to us. I feel like enabling, it's one thing where they say, yes, you can have those powers if you want it, but the fact that they say they may delegate, does that imply they're actually going to delegate those? Or could they say they're not going to for some of the things on that list, for example?
From our experience is if we submit and work with them on a resolution to adopt, if you will, the authority that is granted by this legislation, they have passed it.
Okay.
So that, that's all I can comment. I don't know if it also may say may because it's enabling, it's optional, so they don't have to provide. It's only going to be provided to those that actually work with them and get a resolution passed that outlines our processes, if you will, for implementing this new authority.
Okay, so it's not, it just seems like it's kind of leaving it open for them to pass it and then like say, well, we may, but we're not going to.
To date, they have not. They've always granted the authority to those who request it as it relates to state legislation.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Hey, a good example of the detailed site plan approval caveat would be the Royal Farms development that's going in. Council, we went back and forth. We negotiated a number of concessions, things that we wanted, but because council, in its wisdom, opposed that, the developer went directly to the planning board and was able to move forward without really listening to Greenbelt. So that's just an example. If we had a little more authority over detailed site plans, we would have a little bit more control. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. Well, I think, we didn't get much out of, we weren't going to get anything out of Royal Farms anyway, but, if we want planning and zoning for our city, we're not going to get it by asking, because the county council, they're never going to want to give up their power. And the state legislator, they're not going to do it either. So if we want it, we're going to have to take it. And that's through the legal system, because that's where we're being affected. We're being discriminated against, clearly. And that's how we're going to have to get it, because they're never going to give it to us. They'll give you a little pittance like this that makes you think you're getting something, but you're not getting nothing. So that's it.
Okay, not seeing any more comments. Let's go ahead and vote. And the motion was to send a letter of support.
Yes.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, that measure does pass, and staff will begin to work on a letter of support. The second bill is also a House bill. It's House Bill 1136, Human Services Youth Services Bureau Funding for Youth Service Bureau Restoration Act, repealing a requirement that a certain substance use disorder assessment and referral training be provided by certain entities, such as Greenbelt Cares. Repealing a requirement that youth services bureaus provide alternative leisure activities, repealing a requirement that the proposed budget of the Department of Human Services list eligible youth services bureaus and estimate the amount of state funds to allocate to each. So the recommendation from staff is that we support House Bill 1136. We lost a substantial amount of funding for youth service bureaus, which is Greenbelt Cares is a youth service bureau, and we run really, really high quality, evidence based services through the youth service bureaus. That being said, there was a change in the way that the state regulated or evaluated services. And that's what this measure is really about, repealing some of the requirements that were placed around substance abuse disorders, around youth alternative leisure activities, and also just the budget amount. So we've struggled to try and get some of this funding back, and we did actually get some of the funding back. Would staff like to comment at all on this measure?
I'll add that our Dr. Liz Park is on the Youth Services Bureau board, and she's been at the forefront of pushing for these changes.
Statewide. Yeah.
Statewide, yes. We hosted orientation sessions and some review of the youth service bureaus here in Greenbelt with Senator Alonzo Washington and Delegate Nicole Williams. So we're at the forefront of this change. So I think we were positioned to make the incremental changes that our youth need.
So would you like to make a motion?
Just a question, if, is the recommendation that we just simply send a letter, or is this one where we want to provide testimony? Because that seems like that should be part of the motion.
Both, we need both. I think Mayor Jordan agreed to provide testimony.
Okay.
Actually, not on this one, but I think Dr. Park will probably
Dr. Park will be there, yes.
So I think we should send a letter of support and consult with Dr. Park about testimony, but I suspect that she's already committed to testifying on this bill.
And she knows it in and out, so that it may not be necessary for anyone from council. I think she knows all the details.
Yes, she's a resident expert on that.
Yes.
She's truly an expert. Councilmember Pompey.
I'd like to make a motion.
You gonna make a motion? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to move that the council support House Bill 1136 with both testimony by Dr. Park and a letter.
Second.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, Mr. Schachter?
This wins the first prize for being vague. I don't have a clue what it's talking about. What are the obligations that you're under now, and what is it that you won't have to do anymore? I have no idea what it's about. I hope you all do.
Well, we do have a pretty good idea, but this is a case where actually having a additional legislative support would be helpful, because we would have a full briefing in front of us instead of something that I wrote up or that staff wrote up. Not to say that Dr. Park could have written something where it's vague, but a lot of I hate to say this, a lot of state legislation, the way that it's worded that way for a reason. So repealing a requirement that certain substance use disorder assessments and referral training be provided by a certain entity, that's state legislature talk. So I'm sorry that it's not easier to understand, but I do, and we do understand what we're voting on.
Dr. Park did talk to us about this during our budget discussion.
She did.
She did. I mean, I recall it. I don't know.
And she's been talking about, we talk about this every year, because every year there's an issue with the funding, and they're taking funding away from our, from what CARES usually gets, and then we have to go and fight for it and go through this whole thing. And so that's why this is very important for us to support. And I would think you can also probably look that up online. Maybe it's a little bit more descriptive once you get into more details.
Yeah, and I did go off script a little bit when I started to talk about the state changing some requirements around evaluating youth service bureaus, and that was the problem, and that's what this bill is addressing, actually taking out some of the criteria which made it more difficult for our evidence-based service provisions here in Greenbelt to be evaluated properly. And this was a statewide issue. It wasn't just Greenbelt. It's something that happened to all. I believe there are 9 youth service bureaus across the state.
Which
It's
is
more difficult to get the funding for our programs, the additional funding that we need to provide the programs that we're currently providing to our residents. Because without this additional funding, we would not be able to provide some of the services.
in essence, that's a primary reason for this is to restore funding to the youth service bureaus.
Right.
We are now to half of the service bureaus that were initially established, and a lot of it had to do with funding. We're not a funding stream to support the services.
It's because of the evaluation process that the state put into place a few years ago. All in favor, unless there are any additional comments, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And the final piece of state law, and we really should be approving a list much longer than this, but these are just three really crucial ones. And this is House Bill 0170, the state financing prohibited for appropriations for maglev transit system. So essentially what the bill does is it prohibits the state from providing any funding that's going to actually support the maglev proposal that's been on the books from BWRR. So if they're going to find ways to try and move it forward, they would have to use their own money and not use any state appropriations to fund what they're trying to do.
Except for salaries.
Except for salaries of consultants that are evaluating the proposal. It means that it's just for the salaries of, if we have people in the state that are analyzing the proposal, their salaries would still be covered.
Particularly the permitting process.
So this bill, which is cross-filed by Senator Washington and Delegate Williams, has been, this is pretty much the same legislation for the past 3 years, and it hasn't quite, it hasn't passed yet, but they're reintroducing it, and I am going to testify with council's permission on this coming up on the 22nd, and staff will assist by helping to draft some written comments to submit as well. So would anyone like to make a motion?
Anybody?
Ms. Pope?
Okay, so I move that we support HB 0170/SB 0079.
Thank you.
I
Second, Councilmember McKinney. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you so much. So the list of bills that we need to be looking at is growing all along, and I'm glad that we have authorized the city manager to bring on some additional support. But at the next couple of council meetings, I would expect us to actually weigh in on many more bills, which means we'll have to read the materials in advance and form our own opinions.
And to facilitate that, we put together a tracking sheet on SharePoint. So it should have gotten it should be available to you on SharePoint. You can go through that list and.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I'll look.
Sometimes, a bill will sound a certain way when you read it off, but if you read it carefully, if you actually read it, then, it is very different than what it actually is intended to do. So it's important to actually read things ahead of time.
We don't support all of them, it sounded like tonight, because it was only 3. But there's an occasion where we after reading it through, after going back into the text and really reading it, not just the blurb, there's many times when I decided, no, this may not be enough information, or some details are missing. So that happens, just saying.
It's a bunch of bills. I was talking to Delegate Mary Lehman from District 21, and she's got a bill that has to do with monitoring sound levels to try and control street cars without mufflers. And we had an incident in Greenbelt over the weekend, and anything that we can do to support regulating or trying to prevent these big meetups from happening, we definitely need to try and do. Hey, the next item on the agenda is item number 15, presentation of the draft electric vehicle plan. And so here are the comments. Enclosed in council's packet is the electric vehicle fleet plan. This plan aims to move the city of Greenbelt away from internal combustion engines vehicles for equipment to reduce our carbon footprint and to be more environmentally sustainable. Also, the plan results in a multi-year effort in terms of charging infrastructure and vehicle and equipment replacement. This effort is planned over the next 10 years as the city budget and the EV technology allow. Also in this plan, vehicles and equipment will be converted to EV electric on their regular replacement schedule as supported by the city's annual operating budget. The city will continue to seek grants and other state and federal funding to supplement city resources, understanding that the primary source of funds will come from the general fund in the city budget. And finally, this plan is focused on city vehicles and equipment and city-facing EV infrastructure. The city's Green Team developed an EV IPG document, Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, a plan for Greenbelt, and that was on November 23rd, 2021. And this plan focuses on the public-facing charging capacities, which is different than what we're talking about here. We're talking about the city's fleet of vehicles. Where this plan has provided recommendations to the city for city-facing infrastructure or EV conversion, these recommendations have been incorporated into this plan as well. So, Tim George, Assistant City Manager, you've been working on this plan for a while. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you all. Yeah, there's a big team on this, and that's one of our slides. Benita's going to bring up the presentation. Considering where we are in the evening, I'll go quickly. I'm not going to go through all the common terminology, but because we will be using acronyms. ICE is internal combustion engine. EV or BEV is just an electric vehicle. And then EVSE is just acronym for charging station, electric vehicle supply equipment. The others, hybrid vehicles and plug-in hybrids, are not in this particular PowerPoint, but when we get to the recommendations of the final plan, those will also appear. So I just want to start very quickly, and as you all know, and as the mayor just related, the purpose of this plan, the purpose of forming the committee, is really to take the city from the combustion engine vehicle to the electric vehicle as much as we can. We certainly recognize that we will not be 100% EV, maybe in the next 5 to 10 or 20 years, because technology has to catch up to us. The power grid has to be there. In fact, as we get further along, we may not be doing EVs, we may be doing hydrogen vehicles. So as the technology improves, we may find that we're moving to different kinds of technologies. But the purpose is to kind of reduce our reliance on fossil fuel engines, and that's a big part of it. This is both for, we're looking both at vehicles, on-the-road vehicles, we're looking at off-the-road vehicles, our tractors, the big loaders, things like that. We're also looking at the handheld battery-powered tools and seeing which of those are kind of made for commercial use and which of those we can start to implement into our fleet and which ones we can kind of roll in. As we replace our equipment, we're always looking at the EV alternative or the battery alternative. As we've discussed previously, a lot of that technology doesn't exist yet at the commercial level. There's a lot of residential handheld equipment and lawnmower equipment. It's not quite as accessible at the commercial level. For instance, an electric zero-turn mower is over $35,000. Basically, it's 12, and I looked it up. I actually have the data. It's $12,000 for the batteries, and about $21,000 for the vehicle itself. So as these technologies are out and they get better and they become more popular in the market, those prices will drop. We will continually look at those prices. This plan, as the mayor mentioned, is city-facing. We are always concerned with the EV charging stations that we're putting out there for the public, and we're doing that daily. And we have facilities in Conduit at Buddy Attic Park, and those will be public-facing. This plan specifically is looking at how are we going to electrify our fleet and how are we going to create the necessary infrastructure, Public Works at the police station here in Central Greenbelt for planning and admin so that we can charge these vehicles once they come online. So that's kind of the main focus. The other thing I want to say is that this really is a draft early status update report. This is not a final report. I'll get into what I mean by that as we get to the end. But this is not the final report you're going to get. It's not even just the draft final. It's really just a status update of where we are to date after 5 or 6 months of working together as a team. Next.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So this is a work in progress.
Correct.
And basically, you're briefing us on the progress that has been made to date. Are there any specific questions about what's been presented? Keep going.
I would like to introduce our team. Dr. Robles is online, as is Carrie, and Kevin is in the back to answer questions as well. Also on the team, Brian Townsend, Brian Kim, and Desmond, all with Public Works, and of course, Josue and myself. So this team has been meeting for the past 6 months or so. This actually even began with Debbie Sandlin. She was one of the first to kind of she chaired the committee initially, and a lot of work has gone on, a lot of effort has taken place. And we wouldn't be this far along with this plan without the efforts of everybody on this team. So it really has been a team effort. Oh, yeah, and Lieutenant Apgar, I skipped right over him. And he's been very helpful in talking to us about the police effort and how to change those vehicles over. I learned something I didn't know. I knew that the police had a lot of hybrids on their fleet. They have 27. Which is probably twice as many as when I did my mental count. So they really are moving forward to turn as many of their vehicles into hybrids and even electrics once that comes online. Kind of for the non-patrol, and when the patrol vehicles come online, we'll be doing that as well. Components of the plan, and this was really drawn directly from the report that I submitted, is to develop an inventory of the fleet and the equipment. And with that, Dr. Robles, Kevin, and Brian Townsend and Brian Kim have been very instrumental in pulling that together, as well as Lieutenant Apgar in pulling a list of all the vehicles together for the police. It's kind of a good twofer because we also needed a lot of this data for the budget, for the replacement fund budget. So the timing worked out really well to get a very good detailed look at all of our vehicles, replacement fund, when we're going to be deadlining them and such. Part two, of course, is site planning and charging stations and doing preliminary assessments. I mean, where do we want the charging stations? Where do we need them? Developing cost estimates for both the vehicles and the EVSE stations. Really, one of the most important steps is step 4, and that's a big reason why Carrie's part of the team. We're going to be trying to find as many funding sources outside of the city budget as we can. We're already very active with MEA. PEPCO is a funding source. There's some federal sources. So we're going to be looking very, very aggressively at ways to fund both EVs and the EVSE equipment like that. So a couple of vehicles we purchased, we've gotten $7,500 rebates on a couple of the vehicles we've already bought. So we're being very aggressive at looking at alternate financing sources because we understand the tightness of our city budget and we understand the expense of adding these facilities. If you add a level 2 charger, that's somewhere in the $5,000 to $15,000 range, depending on where you have to run the electricity to and that sort of thing. When you talk about a level 3 charger, if we need one of those can be anywhere from $25,000 to $45,000. So we will be looking for alternate funding sources to help offset the expense on our residents.
You know, I was talking to our former state senator, Paul Pinsky, who's now the secretary, I guess, of the MEA, the Maryland Energy Administration. And he was saying that some additional opportunities for infrastructure funding from the state for charging facilities should be coming online this year.
It's good to know. And Carrie does a fantastic job of tracking that. And she works directly with Kevin and Luisa, who are also tracking it as well. So we have a lot of eyes trying to, identify where additional EV and charging facility infrastructure grants can come from. Then we're going to look at where we're actually going to install the charging stations, and then, of course, step 6 is then to go ahead and really get started purchasing the vehicles, the equipment, and the charging facilities. Activities to date, we've done a lot of work, a lot of research, really getting best practice guidance from other municipalities, from the state, from federal and other nonprofits, just to make sure our plan is going to be comprehensive and complete. As I mentioned, we've assembled a comprehensive list of all the city vehicles. We've identified and looked at the current replacement schedule, which may be subject to change once we kind of get to the next step on this in this slide deck. But we've looked at the replacement schedule of vehicles that we know that are due to be replaced, and we're looking at is there an electric alternative? For some of them, there are the light-duty pickup trucks. You certainly have 2 or 3 options for regular vehicles and light-duty vehicles, vans, and other things. There are electric alternatives. For the Super Duty and heavy-duty trucks, the alternatives have not come out yet. For police patrol, there are some alternatives, but they haven't been proven in the field. So that's kind of one of the things we're waiting for, is kind of field testing on those patrol vehicles. But that is the thought. As vehicles need to be replaced, we are looking at the electric alternative to make sure that if that is an option, even though it'll be a higher cost, that's important to staff, to the council, and to the city to look at those vehicle options. The final thing we've done, and this is Desmond McCollum, our facility supervisor, has taken a look at all of our facilities to see whether or not we have the power we need for not only for the DC fast chargers, but also the level 2s. Because as we continue to put more vehicles and more charging stations online, the power that's run to these buildings was run for the purpose of the buildings. Right now, they're fine to power the vehicles that we have. One of the things that will come out of the study I'm going to talk about in a moment is whether or not the power that's going to our buildings now is sufficient for the full electrification of our fleet. It probably will be. We know that really only the pool and it has level 3 power, 480 power. This building and the police station do not. So if you wanted to put, this building does. The police station and the public works facilities do not have 480 power. So if we wanted to put fast chargers at either of those locations, we'd have to work with Pepco and draw another line off of the pole into the building, put in a 480 box, and that has a significant cost, which is, again, where we would be looking at MEA and other funding sources to help offset that cost so that we could add the capability of DC fast charging at those other 2 facilities. So the questions are going. We're continuing to work while and the next step is really a study that we've undertaken. We are looking at new locations. Josue has been working with a team specifically on providing EVSE equipment at the library behind the community center. So we're working on that. We ran conduit at Buddy Attic Park up to the top of the lot. So when we're ready to do that, the conduit is there. So you simply have to pull the wires. So that will save the cost dramatically in providing electricity at that site. And then Desmond has been working with the police department and with his own team to identify locations at both Public Works and the police station where we could put rows and banks of chargers for police vehicles and Public Works vehicles. So all that is kind of ongoing. We are looking at EV purchases in the 25 budget and also through ARPA spending to try to get those online. We've been investigating an electric trash truck. So the trash truck that you all approved in ARPA funding will be a diesel trash truck, but we are looking at an electric version. There's a version now. It's about $600,000, and it's proven in the market. It's fully electric, so that's one that we've been looking at. We're trying to see which of our, if any of our peers or folks that we can reach out to we can kind of talk to them about it. That might be a vehicle that we might look at in 26. When, depending on funding and as the budget would allow. But that's certainly a direction we're going. In order to get that, we really need to make sure that we have the electric capacity, because that vehicle is certainly going to take a fair amount of energy to recharge. Questions? Otherwise, so the next thing we're doing, and this is something we've engaged in already, so the Clean Fuels Technology Assistance Program is through MEA, and this program is where the MEA will fund a consulting firm that specializes in this arena to take a look specifically at Greenbelt, at our fleet, at our operations and the needs of our fleet and our operations, and provide advice and guidance to us on how to electrify our fleet. So we've already engaged them. They're actively working now. They should finish their work in May. Just an example, I printed out a couple of different reports they've done. They've done a report for Prince George's County, Gaithersburg, Howard County, Baltimore City, Cumberland, Laurel, Rockville, and Anne Arundel. So those are the reports they've done in 21 and 22. They're doing 5 this year, and we're one of the 5. So we'll get a very comprehensive report that will really lay out their recommendations for the fuel needs, and they're even going to look at hydrogen and other alternate fuel sources beyond the fossil fuels.
It's good. That's I think that information will help us to move along. I'm very interested in just trying to find a way to accelerate some aspects of this plan. I know there's some things where we're constrained by the technology, and certainly the infrastructure, having the charging infrastructure is a constraint. But
one of the things, as you recall in my ARPA presentation last week, we are recommending that we reallocate funds from the lost revenue funds immediately so that we can start putting in EVSE charging infrastructure at both the police station and the public works facility. So that's something we want to do right away. And that's ARPA funding that is available if it's reallocated. I guess we're going to have another meeting to vote on those proposals, but that is one way that we would do it immediately. Through Joswe's leadership, we've purchased 2 more electric vehicles just in the last month or so. We have a Mach-E and another Bolt online, so we are actively adding electric vehicles to our fleet as we go. And the money that we're asking for through ARPA will allow us to get that EVSE infrastructure up and running quickly.
it's fantastic. This is really encouraging, hearing the progress that we're making.
To your question of expediting some of these projects, we're actively working on the library project, and we have a proposal. The challenge I see with the proposal, it's the price point was just enough to have us move forward, but it requires putting in more poles to run the line overhead. And in that space, because it's right next to the trail, just adding more poles just doesn't, it is not appealing. And we're looking at the undergrounding of the line to the area that we need, and we'll look to see what the price difference is, and I hope that we can fund it and move that forward this year. The goal is to get that bank of 8 level 2 charging stations at the library in 2024.
Yeah, I understand. So specifically about that area is, and perhaps I'm wrong about the library is actually also interested in doing some sort of a project or something over there along the trails. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a proposal that recreations, planning, and community development are looking at that would put if I'm thinking the project you're thinking is the story time.
Story trail.
Story trail, which will put up, is it 10 or 12
Kiosks.
stations?
Maybe as many as 20.
Oh, as many as,
It's quite a few, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
so as many as 20 stations that will allow individuals, particularly kids, to walk through a trail reading a story.
Right, it's sort of connected to our library, between the library and the community center, so it would sort of draw people in. But thank you for this information. Thank you for the work. Is there more? Okay. Hey, one thing you talked about the replacement schedule, and as the fleet begins to move towards electric or other greener types of technology with fewer moving parts. Perhaps the replacement schedule will begin to shift, where we'll be able to keep and maintain vehicles a little bit longer. I guess the part that we don't really know about is the batteries and whatnot, how long they'll last, and what we'll do with them ultimately when it comes time to recycle. Other comments from council? Ms. McKinney?
This is very helpful, very informative. I would just hope that as part of the future, you're looking at other areas, both in east and west, for possible locations, because it seems like this first part is more focused on the center of town. So I just wondered if you had already started to look at possible locations outside of that.
Well, I think this is focused in the center of town because that's where our buildings are, and these are city focused. But we have charging stations at Schramm now. We have charging stations at Spring Hill Lake. And as we look at the public-facing charging stations, yes, we will make sure that we have an equitable distribution throughout the city. That'll be very important on the public side. But these are kind of city-focused. They'll be inside the gate. These will not be accessible to the public. And depending on the funding, like some of the funding you get, you can only install public-facing charging. And some of the funding is for city-facing funding, so it also depends on what funding source we use. But yes, absolutely. As we grow the EVSE network throughout the whole city, we will make sure that we have an equitable distribution. And one of the things is, as the mayor pointed out, as far as zoning goes, and we don't have a tremendous amount of zoning control. We have some influence. We will always ask new developments and new developers to put in EVSE charging whenever they come up with a new program, a new plan. So that, like, if there's a new office building built, we're going to ask that they put in charging stations with their development. At this point, it's an ask because we don't have the actual control. But that's something that's very important to us. And as we continue along that path, we will always advocate for charging stations, especially when Beltway Plaza comes online with their product. We will certainly be asking them very strenuously to please have charging stations available when they do their new development as well.
Yeah, and I just following up on that, I'm pretty sure there are some in the Verdi parking garage, and I know there are some at Motiva, and I know those were part of the plans for the senior age-restricted housing on Greenbelt Road. So, so far it seems like people have been amenable to adding those. I think those developers see the way the trends are going. The other thing, and this just reminds me of something that we might add to the Franklin Park conversation, because it seems to me that there have been, and this is not related to this plan, I apologize, but this made me think of it, is I feel like I've heard some comments, I think some folks on Green Aces, and Dr. Robles, you can correct me, of some proposals that came forward, some people who had tried to approach Franklin Park, because there are companies that will come in and put in chargers. Now they're going to charge money for them, but even the Pepco ones you pay for a little bit. But that, I think, could be a way that we can get more accessibility for chargers in a lot more places that are public-facing chargers. And that might be something to add to the Franklin Park agenda. And maybe, Dr. Robles, you can help me dig out that information that came up at Green Aces so we can discuss that specifically with Franklin Park next week.
Yeah, I remember that it was a company called EV Avanza. Steve Alfaro was the heading that effort. They had gotten a grant to install electric vehicle charging stations for underprivileged communities, and they offered to install some at Franklin Park. A couple of the Green Team members, myself and Steve Alfaro, we actually drove around Franklin Park to figure out whether this was a community that they could support with having the electric vehicles. And Steve Alfaro said yes. We tried contacting the Franklin Park management on multiple occasions through different angles, and they never got back to us. Steve Alfaro even went to their office and sat there one day hoping to be seen by somebody, and no one ever saw him. So it's really hard to communicate with Franklin Park. They could have right now charging stations, but they never responded, and now that grant is over. So I can contact Steve Alfaro again and see if there will be new grants coming in, but it sounds like this was a one-time opportunity and it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because we council, when we meet with Franklin Park, it usually does come up, and we've asked. Yeah, another opportunity for public-facing charging stations, Beltway Plaza, but you have to wonder at what point is WMATA going to actually install some charging stations at metro stations? I mean,
They
it
have
makes
a
sense. People come, they park, their cars would be there for 2 or 3 hours.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's another opportunity we promoted a couple months ago, which was the workplace charging program. So we promoted that through our social media networks, which the workplace charging program provided incentives for employers to install EV charging stations.
Okay, so Dr. Robles and Ms. Uri, do you have anything to add to the presentation or any thoughts that you wanted to share?
Not at this time. We do have, as Tim said, we have a list of 20 grants that we're monitoring closely. And once we get exact locations and the other numbers from the report that's being drafted, then we'll match those with the grants that we know are available.
Excellent, excellent. So, Amy Niesel, Council.
Thank you. I know that we're all really, really excited about electric vehicles, but I do fear that it's still a fairly new technology, and I worry about the human toll of mining the materials that go into EV batteries. So I wonder if, and I should probably know this, but I don't, how many vehicles do we currently have? And then what would the replacement schedule be, approximately how many per year? Because I would not like to exceed what we already expect to replace. I don't feel that we should fast track this.
We have a table of how many vehicles, and Tim will pull that up. But in our electric fleet, we have 6 vehicles that are fully electric, 25 hybrids at the police station.
We have approximately 160 vehicles in our fleet, in the active fleet. At any one time, some are decommissioned and some are not. We have 70 vehicles or so at Public Works, 78 at the police department, and then the balance are in rec, admin, and planning. Each of us have 2 or 3 vehicles, and we're not planning for a couple of reasons. We're not going to replace all of them at once. First of all, we don't have the infrastructure, and we don't have the budget. So the plan is, typically we will replace 2 or 3 vehicles or more a year just on their general deadline cycle anyway. And as those vehicles need to be replaced, we'll look at the EV alternative. In some cases, the EV alternative doesn't exist yet, so that would still be replaced with an ICE vehicle. So it's not. I don't know that we will. We're going to try to get there as quickly as possible. So it really is kind of a 10 to 20 year effort. As the technology gets better, as the prices get lower, and as we build our charging infrastructure, we can replace more vehicles more quickly. But I would see, I don't know that we want to put a specific number, but we're going to replace 3 or 4 vehicles a year. Then you'd like to see half of them be electric. It's kind of maybe a rule of thumb as we start moving down the road.
That sounds reasonable. Thank you.
And I think what we have now is a number of hybrids in the police department, but in terms of fully electric, it's under half a dozen, right? It's a couple code enforcement, the Mach-E 6. So that's all we have right now.
And one of the things I haven't really talked deeply to the manager or the police chief about this, so I'll probably get yelled at by both of them. But one of the things that I think the EVIPG plan had suggested, one thing we support would be to get an all-electric vehicle for the police department for patrol as a test case, so that you could have someone actually use a vehicle in a real-world environment. I know that the Mach-E has been outfitted for police use with other police forces. So one of the ways we could do that would be to kind of, as Terry said on the planning thing, take a baby step and do a test case ourselves and see how it works. And as the technology comes online, as the charging infrastructure is available, continue to work down that path, because I think that's the way we want to go. But because public safety and the response to our residents and responding to 911 calls is so critical, we need to make sure that our vehicles are reliable. So we'll want to take the patrol step very carefully.
Mr. Roberts, please.
What is the Mach-E? Is that the Mustang or?
Yes, it's the
Yeah,
Ford.
the Mustang.
It's
It's the Mustang, right?
It's called the Mustang. It's not like the Mustang, but yes, it's called the Mustang.
Well, I think it's kind of like a high performance type of thing. So I don't know that that's really on our line, per se. But I mean, that's what I've always thought it was. I don't know for sure because I'm not a big Ford man. So, but I know the Ford pickup, that also is more of like a performance, like toy type thing. It's not, In fact, I think they stopped making it because they wanted to make some other stuff or something. But yeah, I don't think they're really it's not really a work truck per se, you know what I mean? But I agree with Amy because I think we should go slow on this because eventually I think the hydrogen is also an electric vehicle. It just makes its own electricity.
Right.
So that may be, that can take over or something else could come along or whatnot. So if we put millions and millions of dollars into charging stations, and then it becomes obsolete, then you're back where you started from, or you've wasted all that money. So I think it's prudent to see how things go out. But in the long run, it's my position that whether it's an electric vehicle or a hydrogen or whatever it is, we have too many, and there's so many vehicles that it doesn't matter how you're powering them. The amount of resources it takes to mine for the stuff and to build the cars and all that, we're not going to get anywhere. We're still going to ruin our planet because, the batteries take a huge amount of energy just to get the materials and stuff. So I think we're kind of, we're fooling ourselves that this is going to save us, and it's not. The only way it's going to save us is if we change our lifestyle and don't rely on the automobile. That's the only way we're going to save our planet. Electric cars are not going to do it because they take more energy and materials than even a car from 1960, way more. I mean, let me tell you, the bundles of wires they got in them new cars is unreal. It's a lot of copper. They got a lot of gold because they got to have good connections for all this electric stuff in the cars. It can't just be copper. It's got to be gold. So it's really not, if you really want to look out at the future, this is not going to be the determining factor of whether, we destroy our planet or not, unfortunately. But I see that view because I work in the industry. I know mechanical stuff, and it's obvious to me, but not real obvious to most people, I guess.
Thank you. Hey, my concern in trying to move this along a bit is that over the past few years, we deferred a lot of our replacement vehicles for 2 or 3 years. And then we got the infusion of ARPA money. And what we ended up doing is we've just bought a lot of gasoline-powered vehicles in the past 2 years. So when we could have been maybe adding some more hybrids or sticking to the same schedule, but I just feel like we're behind because of COVID. So using the ARPA funding is appropriate, but I feel like, particularly with our police fleet, there's just a lot of Dodge Durangos. Let's see, we'll take a public comment and then we'll accept the report, I guess. I don't think we need there's no motion or anything.
No, there's no vote.
Mr. Schachter, please.
Leon Schachter, 9B Parkway. I'm just curious as to how charging chargers in public spaces is expected to work. I mean, is it going to be first come, first served? Is it going to be anybody who shows up? You're going to try to limit it to residents? Is it going to be like putting air in your tires, which used to be free, and now you got to put money in the machine? Are you going to be putting money in the charger? Are people really going to sit in their cars, especially at night, for more than a half hour even? It's all those questions will drive where you put these chargers accessible to the public.
Those are excellent questions, and it takes a lot of time to get through all those details. What we're thinking in terms of our level 2 infrastructure that's public facing, we're thinking of how the EV users are going to use those charging stations and the places that we're considering. So the only one right now, well, there's 2 places we're thinking of public facing infrastructure, that's Buddy Attic and the library. Both of these locations are destinations. People are going to these places because there's another activity that they're planning. They're not they're squeezing in charging as part of their other activities. They may be going to play racquetball or pickleball in the center, and they're going to be playing a 2-hour game. So that the charging is part of that activity. They're going to Buddy Attic to participate in walking or doing the playground. So we're thinking of it as the usage. These are destination chargers, and folks are going to be there for up to 2 hours to get a full vehicle charge. And that's what level 2 charging infrastructure is designed around, destination. People are going to a place to do things. The level 3 charging infrastructure is meant to replace your gas stations, your commuter routes, your folks that are traveling through spaces. So that they want a quicker charge. So think of a gas station on a highway, you're going to take 30 minutes to charge your car. That level 3 infrastructure is, from a public facing perspective, is not a priority for us because we just don't have a business in that space right now. What we have a business in level 3 is, and what does our high use vehicles are, those vehicles that need fast charging. I know we talked about this in a work session about the need to keep police vehicles charged at all times because of their utility. So that infrastructure. There's a video that I would like to point our citizens to. In 2021, there was a robust conversation with, I think it was Green Aces and Council had a work session, and they talk about in great detail the advantages, disadvantages of level 2, level 3 charging infrastructure, and that meeting's available on our website. Anyone who wants to know more of it, that was a robust conversation. And we can talk about this all night, but I don't think Council is interested in going very long on this meeting.
Right. Hey, I appreciate the dialogue and the comments. A lot to think about, and as this initiative, as this task force continues its work, particularly when it comes to seeking out external funding to make some of the priorities, the infrastructure priorities happen. I appreciate being updated so that we can, if there are policy decisions to be made, we can certainly weigh in. I'd like to make a motion that we special order item number 25 on the agenda to next up.
That sounds good. I second.
Okay. So let's see. That has to do with the. Okay, all in favor. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. So I'm going to read the comments for this. It's the approval for the Greenbelt ARPA Outreach and Communications Plan following our work session on February 7th, which was last week, where citizens presented the necessity for a more aggressive outreach to ensure the effective disbursement and utilization of ARPA funds, especially in historically underserved communities. This memo seeks to recommend approval for the Greenbelt ARPA Outreach and Communications proposal. The project, which is estimated at $40,000, aims to increase awareness and applications for available ARPA grants through a targeted outreach at neighborhoods such as Franklin Park, Charleston North, and other apartment communities. This proposal, overseen by a dedicated team in close consultation with the city management staff, involves a two-phase canvassing plan, social media marketing, and direct communication efforts to maximize the impact of ARPA funds by leveraging both door-to-door and stationary canvassing along with modern communication tactics. This initiative promises a significant step forward in our commitment to reaching every corner of Greenbelt with vital ARPA resources. So Council's approval will not only endorse a comprehensive strategy to enhance civic engagement, but also ensure that ARPA funds are utilized to their fullest potential in serving our community needs. So we have a couple of leaders here from the community that put forward this outreach and communications plan. But let me just say this. I was inspired by the thought that went into the outreach and communications plan. This came up at the work session, I guess it was on Wednesday. So what I was thinking is, I love the concept and I want to move forward, but I would like to see a broader outreach, and I would like to actually allocate more funding towards this kind of initiative. Council, several of you remember that we had discussed launching a major visioning effort about 3 years ago before COVID. We were kind of overdue to actually launch that effort. So when this proposal, the idea of door-to-door canvassing, actually creating jobs, little workforce development to actually create some jobs for local residents, to do outreach, what rang in my mind was, let's step this up to something a little bit more broader, more citywide, and maybe not just about ARPA resources, but actually kind of collecting the kind of data that we've never been able to capture with our city survey that goes out with the during the elections. The only people who vote are really know that it's an opportunity to influence city policy with that. So this came as a little bit of a surprise because it came so fast, and I agree this is something that is an appropriate use of ARPA funds, but I would propose that we think a little bit bigger, and since we are at a step where we're talking about reallocating ARPA funds, maybe using this kind of two-phased canvassing plan, social media, but also the direct communication efforts. I think that we can have a real impact and get a lot of community feedback on our goals, accomplish the visioning exercise that we had planned to do 3 or 4 years ago, and just do this all with, perhaps substantially more funding.
May I?
It's like a WPA project. We create some jobs, do some supervision. So I was surprised that this came forward so fast because I love it, and I think it'll work really well.
Well, we're doers. We want to get these projects that council has signaled moving forward, just moving them forward. And it's my understanding at the work session that there was overwhelming support to have this outreach plan move forward. So we want to put it before you at the earliest, so that the team that is looking to execute this program can start moving forward. I want to put the timeline in perspective. We're in February, mid-February, and we need to spend the ARPA funding by December of 2024. Encumber. So in terms of many of the projects that the team, that our citizens group is looking to promote, these are scholarship funds, micro grants, so many grants that our goal is to get that money spent by September. That is 6 months away. Time's going to go by very quickly. So I want to reduce any barriers, reduce any red tape and getting in the way of these outreach programs. I want to get it out there as soon as possible. In speaking with you about the visioning program, I think it's a great idea to do visioning program. We talked about it in terms of where are we headed as a city? What's our vision? What's our strategic plan? Envisioning for the community is key to that. And outreach, a robust outreach component, is essential to getting all the inputs from our citizens, because we're here for citizens and we create the vision around the citizen input.
And it's a deferred priority. This is something that we prioritized, was it about 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Right. Now, outreach and communication is one component of the visioning process. I think we also need to ensure that the methodology around the visioning is solidified. So I don't know what happened 4 years ago. I haven't read up on what work was done on the visioning. In order for us to put together a proposal or a program to do visioning for the community, I would have to get with my team, and particularly planning and community development, to look at the visioning from a planning perspective. And there's also visioning from a strategic perspective as a council body. So I think I love where you're coming from. I will want some more time to strategize around what visioning will look like for council and the community.
And I wouldn't want to take too much time. I would like to kind of move it ahead. But I think we have a lot of resources. I think the university has helped us design our annual or our election, our 2-year cycle survey in the past, and I think that there's quite a bit of expertise around us. So I don't think it has to be a long, drawn out kind of planning exercise prior to actually getting things going and encumbering the money to do so.
And I agree, and I think the citizen group, they have infrastructure to build to do the canvassing and the door-to-door and all that outreach strategy. Whatever they build can be used for other purpose. I think that's part of the discussion at the work session is we build this infrastructure, we want to be able to utilize for future community engagement. So I think having the citizen group get started doesn't cut us off from any opportunity. On the contrary, the earlier they're able to build infrastructure, that will be that much further ahead and adding on to that element. And the citizens are here, and I don't know if you want to weigh on it, but
What do you guys think? Mayor Pro Tem?
You want to let them go, or do you want me to comment first?
Well, what do you think? You want to comment first?
I can go either way. I mean, very briefly, I'm a little bit concerned about expanding the scope on this right now. I think we should do visioning, but I think the ARPA process is time sensitive. And I think that building the networks to then plan to do a visioning process after that seems like a better plan to me than trying to do everything all at once. Given the constraints we have with the ARPA money, I would be worried about trying to do it all together. The other thing I wanted, and maybe Nirvan or Bob can address this, is I think we talked about on Wednesday whether the 40,000 was what you wanted to ask for or whether it should be 45. So if you can also address that, but.
Yeah, so what Mayor Emmett is suggesting is not out of sync with what we had in the proposal. So our main focus is ARPA money. Our main focus is getting people connected with the applications and filling out the applications and actually availing the money. But in beyond ARPA, in the section of the proposal, we did mention that we would like to create some more infrastructure, as Mayor Jordan is suggesting. So they're not mutually exclusive ideas. But the focus immediately is getting outreach workers hired, getting them skilled and trained and out there, and getting some feedback on the process itself. Before we work on visioning, like the fundamental infrastructure, we need to start building that out immediately. That's yeah.
Mr. Rand?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So I love the idea of visioning, but maybe that could be phase 3. In conversations with staff, it was very clear that a cutoff date is September. If we don't have that would be the time we need to get any last minute grants out to city for application. I'm also wondering what the experience of the person at the door would be if you come with 10 different things you want to convey to the person. They might lose interest after 30 seconds. So it might be possible to have a packet of information that would include some CARES resources as well as the ARPA programs. You could leave things with people. I'm just thinking of my own experience with canvassing is it's more helpful if it's very focused. But here's my ask. Here's what I'd like you to do, and then you leave hoping that they'll follow through. But if we leave with 5 or 6 different things that we'd like them to accomplish, that might be a little bit too much. However, I love the idea of you kind of thinking about expanding the scope and seeing where this might go. So maybe there's more discussion we need to have around this to kind of think about how it works on both sides, including the person that's answering the door.
Councilmember McKinney.
Yeah, I love the idea of canvassing. I also love the idea of visioning. I do think there needs to be some additional planning. But I have a couple of questions just to think about. I know you probably don't have answers for them right now. But I think the data collection piece is an important thing to think about. So when you're going out there, what are you expecting to get back and how are you going to collect that data so that could potentially inform any kind of visioning that we might use in the future? So if we could have some parameters or structure around that, I think that would be helpful. In the proposal, you had mentioned something about 100 or so units in Franklin Park was the goal. And just thinking about the number of units.
For the first phase.
First phase. Okay, that's because I was like, that's a very small number given
It's
the
like
size
2,000
of Franklin
total.
Park. Yeah. Okay.
2,800.
Right. So if I don't know if what phase one or phase two is, but even getting to like a 10% would be good in that. I had mentioned before the training, making sure you have training available for your canvassers and adequate training. And then you had also talked about the coordinator duties and responsibilities. How and when are you going to try to select this coordinator? Because I think that's also a huge part of the timeline, right? To get that person in place to be able to get the canvassers going more quickly.
Right now, that person is me.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to assume.
Yeah, I mean, we could try and hire someone that doesn't have a full-time job,
Okay.
but right now it's just me.
Okay, perfect. And then you're thinking about what the key things are, the ask, if it's just 3 things, I don't know if you all have started to talk about that. What are the 3 key pieces that you want to inform people about when you're going door to door? I think it's going to be, especially for this first phase, I agree, trying to keep it small and building on that for phase 2. But I like the proposal. I think it can be helpful for setting some infrastructure for the future.
Do you want those answers now, or was
Nope,
there
I
some-
said those are just things to think about.
Sure.
So if you could, make sure when you're coming back to us on the result, if we're going to put the money forward, I want to make sure we're building a foundation that can help support this type of effort in the future.
I was also intrigued by the consultant for the who mentioned that he knows how to geolocate a survey that at a certain door. So that's something maybe we can look into.
And the budget question was it, because I thought, didn't 45?
45. There was a mistake in the presentation.
Okay, so
the
if we're gonna
proposal
approve-
has the correct number.
Okay.
The big document that's linked in the agenda.
Okay, I
That one-
think it still says 40.
It does say 40, so we welcome a friendly amendment to that.
Yeah, I think when we make the motion, we can
Okay.
do that. I just wanted to make sure we got the number, that we had the right number, that we can adjust that.
There's an app called Organizer that might actually be helpful. And I don't know if you've started to look at that technology, but I'm thinking about the budget, if there is something that needs to go into that to allow for people to be able to get that on their phone easily. Just want to make sure, I don't see that that's a line item in the budget, but there might be some technology that's needed, not just paper-based, to collect that data.
And that's something we'd be happy to work with the team on figuring out an application that, or a data service that we could buy now that then we would have access to.
Council member.
One concern I have is you talk about creating different flyers, experimenting with different flyers and QR codes, and I would just want to make sure that you're coordinating with the city so that you're working with our city style guide and that our communications coordinator has sort of approval over what we're putting out there as city documents or representative of the city.
I don't want to, I love our style guide and I think it works great and the brand consistency. I think that some of the constituency that we're looking to outreach might benefit from a different style, something that may be more organic. They might respond to things differently. They might not necessarily be a postcard. It may be, we talked about some social events, like just standing on a corner doing ice cream social and just giving out free ice cream and stuff like that as an engagement tool. And I'm drawing from my gang intervention work, that there may be folks that are not going to respond to a document with official letterhead or branded material. They might be looking for more guerrilla style marketing campaigns that might be more responsive. So I wouldn't want to lock in the outreach team to a specific style, because the population that they might want to touch isn't used to looking at that kind of print media in that way. So, but I appreciate that. I just want to keep it
Right. Well, I mean, also,
flexible.
I just want to make sure that they realize that it's legitimate too, that we're asking them to scan this code and to sign on the stuff, that it really is coming from the city. So,
Well, one thing, so my concern with short term is that there is some equity in this outreach. So, when we were talking on Wednesday, we were talking about reaching the apartment community. So that's not just Franklin Park. There are apartments in other places in the city. So in choosing a sample size, the number of places you're going to outreach to, it's pretty straightforward to get the number of interviews that you need to get as a random representation of a certain number of people. So what you've written, it says Franklin Park, Charleston North, and other apartment communities. And what we said on Wednesday was, University Square, Glen Oaks, and specifically, I did mention that there are a lot of people that are renting condominiums and renting other in houses, single family houses. And so somehow consulting with the city through the planning department and looking at where the apartment permits, somehow incorporating that into your thinking and outreach is very important to me. Kristen.
I was just going to move that council approve the Greenbelt ARPA Outreach and Communications Plan with the amendments of adding some additional apartments, as well as, I think, instead of Mandan Village, Glen Oaks, but making some of those corrections, as well as increasing the budget to $45,000, and just make sure we change and get an updated copy with all of these with those changes made. But I move that.
I just have a comment to remember the zip code, because you had the zip code in there, and the zip code far reaches our city limits, so this needs to be taken care of. And Franklin Park, I think it's 2,800 apartments.
Yeah.
So you can get ready.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we got a comment from the public.
Oh, we do.
Mr. Orleans.
Bill Orleans still, resident still. I have absolutely no problem. In fact, I appreciate the use of canvassers throughout town, even if they're paid canvassers, and maybe in some instances that would be more appropriate. But I have a question. Council's about to approve this, and I might approve this, but I might not. Council's about to approve this. There's only a reference to the proposal PDF in the publicly distributed agenda, and I reached through the agenda package I would request and ask for, which is the complete agenda package. And similarly, there's only reference in blue. There's a link to the communications proposal in that. It would seem to me if council is about to appropriate $40,000, and it seems like in discussion it might be more than that, before you vote, the public who's ever interested should have an opportunity to read the proposal in its full. It may be similar to what was outlined last week. It may be different. I don't know. It seemed like in discussion tonight among council, it might be a little different. But I don't think you should vote unless people here have an opportunity to see what you're voting on.
It's part of the agenda packet online, and it's the same as what was in last week. It is available online. I just clicked on it, and it's there in the full agenda packet online.
Ms. Weaver, I have no idea if I'm the only person in town who may not have access to it online. I appreciate it that it may be online. My point was it's not here in the publicly distributed agenda, and it's not even in the agenda that council would have before it tonight.
That's incorrect, because we got it before tonight, because it's in the packet that we received, as well as having been part of the complete packet on Wednesday.
I know one thing was removed from the packet I got tonight. I thought it was only one thing. I did not know this was not the thing removed. The point is, not everybody who might have an interest in knowing what you're about to vote for knows what you're about to vote for. And council should not be spending the city's money unless residents know what it is you're voting on, how to spend it.
Okay. Now,
It's available in multiple places.
that's being a little aggressive now, and that's not necessary.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think you should be addressed like that. I'm sorry. That's not okay.
Well, let's go ahead, and if there are no additional comments online.
I don't see any. Oh, no, there is one hand raised
Yes, there's
online.
one online.
Please, can you promote?
Yeah,
that,
Mr.
please?
Adams.
Mr. Adams, are you there?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate very much the council's, your leadership on this Mayor Jordan and the city manager's aggressive support. It's just very heartwarming to be part of this and to know. I'm also grateful that we're not trying to expand it immediately. This is complex, hard work, and building this infrastructure is not an easy thing. Otherwise, it would have been done. And so I appreciate getting some time and getting started and the support to, and also think that building, and I think we have different visions perhaps of, when you talk about random samples, I'm not sure we're looking for a scientific study of the of the renters of Greenbelt. We're looking to build constituencies in different neighborhoods and to increase the participation as much as we can and to build a system. The goal of connecting across Greenbelt is to, it's very hard to bring our divided community together, is to find leaders and people that we can connect with in all parts of the community. And so if we're successful in doing that, I think we'll be more successful in bringing people together in a later process for visioning and to hear from them as we move forward. So thank you very much for your support.
Okay, any additional comments? Yes.
I think it would be really helpful, especially since we're talking about expanding this program, that after you're done with this outreach effort, if you guys could come back to us and just talk to us about your best practices. What worked, what didn't work, what surprised you, what did you have to change course at any point? Just so that as we're moving forward, like if we do want to carry this forward, we do want to do some visioning, that we're not recreating the wheel, that we already know like what was successful, what was not. Because you assume that not everything is going to work, right? But because reading your proposal, you're going to try several things to see like what's effective. So that would be really helpful, I think, if you guys could come back to us with that and
Yeah,
talk about
we'd be
that.
happy to do like a weekly update, like Carrington and Barnes. Like I think I read in their proposal, they're offering some weekly updates on things like that. So
Yeah,
we'd
that'd be
happy to do
great.
something like that.
Regular updates would be great too.
You might not want to commit to weekly.
Yeah, that might be a lot, but even like monthly or just, even occasional, even sending in updates to Josue and he can add them to his, his manager's report. So.
I would like to add something. I appreciate the kind words from the team of how we are being proactive and pushing this forward. I want to recognize the citizens group that they identify an issue, but they came with a solution. They didn't come with the problem. They say, here's the solution. We want to fix this. So I appreciate you guys just stepping in and wanting to fix things.
Okay, sounds good. Let's take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the measure carries. But I still want to get to that visioning thing. It's a deferred priority. We talked about it 5 years ago. We put it off. We need to do that
I
community-wide.
have a whole new council here.
I love this as a pilot program almost for the visioning program. I mean, I think this will be great.
Thank you. Hey, let's move on to item number 16, which is council activities.
I have a proposal that I just pull this up on the screen and we don't spend a lot of time talking about it because it's almost 11 o'clock. So here's the council activities that, lots of stuff going on. I don't know if anybody wants to make any particular comments, but we can give this to Ms. Anderson. I shared the document with you, Ms. Anderson, so you can put it in the minutes, but there's the things we've been up to.
We're busy people.
So
This
And-
is without tracking all the legislation.
That's
so-
yeah. And I loaded it into an Excel if that's easier for people, so we can look at both options.
Yeah,
and what
I think.
works.
Any comments? We good with that as the council reports? Done in a minute.
I like it. Perfect.
Okay.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's really great. Thank you.
Item number 17, council reports. Okay, item number 18, we've got closed session.
There's one more item, 26.
26.
So I move to special order 26 before we go to 18.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Pompey has it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So at the December 11th, 2023 council meeting, council approved appointments to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments policy boards and committees. And since that time, we've got a new council member that's joined us. So I suppose one of the reasons for this is there was, in my opinion, there was an error that was made administratively in what was passed on to COG initially. But also, we do have a new council member who's on board, so we need to add her into the mix. So there's a attachment sheet which lists the county and other appointments, and I'm sure that all of council has reviewed this carefully. But with the COG appointments also, what I remember, what I did when we were having discussions about the Transportation Planning Board, I did request to be placed as the alternate on the TPB. On the county listing, within the city, the mayor typically has not really taken on a liaison position with the different advisory boards because there's a lot to do. Being able to have a choice and select one or two committees is a privilege that I think, like to do it. Also mentioned with the Region Forward Coalition, it's hard to describe, but it's not a policy setting board, but it's sort of like a multidisciplinary body that makes recommendations to the board just about strategic direction. So, for example, they'll take some of the out-year goals that the Transportation Planning Board has for vehicle emissions, and they'll try and reconcile that with what the Environmental Committee does. So it's really a very interesting and a very important committee to serve on, but we don't really have to have a liaison. All of us should be popping in on those meetings from time to time. Now, if we do have to have someone that's associated with that, I've done it in the past. I'd really rather somebody else can take it on. Amy, if you want to do it, that'd be great. Mayor?
Yeah, So I spoke to Mr. Roberts last week, and I think that this is what was on the consent agenda for the December 11th meeting. But it sounds like he's not particularly interested in the alternate position. So I think if you would like to be added to that, I checked with Mr. Roberts already. I am happy to be the primary on that. I think also, there's a few. I have two that I'm the primary, and Jenny does as well. So I'm interested in doing the Transportation Planning Board. I'm also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Services Committee for NLC, so I think that makes a lot of sense. And I try to go to the Metro Washington Air Quality Committee as much as I can. That one, they do vote on some things, but it's much broader regionally. But if that's something, Amy, that you're interested in, and I think Jenny, I think there was one of those two. There's the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee and the Chesapeake Bay Committee. I don't know if there's one of those that you would be less interested in that Amy might take the primary on.
Yeah, if you were interested in CIPSE, the Climate, Energy, and Environmental Policy Committee, I'd be happy to have you serve on that one. But you don't have to serve on all three here. That we
No. I'm just saying. I think.
Just to be clear, we're not like take them all. If you just want.
I also want to say that Danielle is serving on two as primary.
Yeah. Oh, is she primary on two? That's true. Danielle's primary on two as well. Yeah. So whatever makes the most sense. What seems interesting to you is also important.
It's very important, and so it also it'd be nice to you can always watch. CPC. That sounds like fun. CPC.
They're a fun group.
It's a fun group.
It's actually very similar to. They cover a lot of the similar things to Chesapeake Bay Water Resource Policy Committee, but just sort of broader, I think.
Right. And Chesapeake Bay meets on a quarterly basis, or is it semi-annually?
We are quarterly.
Quarterly.
And CIPSE also meets quarterly, and they actually meet 1 week right after the other, if I recall. So I'm happy to, or maybe it's every other month Chesapeake Bay meets.
Okay. And
anyway.
Region Forward is also quarterly. It's not every month.
Yeah, no, Chesapeake Bay I think meets every other month.
So anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I think we.
Well, what I'm hearing is that you're interested in not being primary on Region Forward.
Yeah, it doesn't. We don't really need a primary, but if you'd like to put your name on that, that'd be great.
I'd be happy to put my name on that. And what I'm also hearing is that perhaps SIPSI would be help to you
Sure,
for me
yeah.
to take.
Be great.
And Kristen,
I can stick with that one's also only quarterly, so it's not as it doesn't meet, it's not as extensive of the meetings, the air quality committee. So if SIPSI sounds more interesting in that and Region Forward, I mean, it'd be useful maybe to have, because I think that is one where sometimes there are things we vote on. So if somebody wanted to be the alternate on that, just in case I can't make it and there's an important vote happening, although I'm not sure what they're voting on is, yeah, it's important, but it's less specific seeming, it seems like to me.
well, if I were primary on those two, would everyone feel comfortable with their workload then?
They're quarterly, sure. The other ones, some of them are monthly.
And
so-
yes, I'm happy to be the alternate on the air quality.
Okay, so it sounds like the amendments we're proposing, so I move that we change the alternate for TPB to Mayor Jordan, the alternate for Air Quality Committee to Amy Niesel, primary for SEPC to Amy Niesel, primary for Region Forward, Amy Niesel. And then Jenny, do you want to stay as alternate for SEPC?
Sure. That'd be good.
And do you feel like, Danielle, that you need to have an alternate on the Food and Agriculture Regional meeting?
I mean, it would be good to have one, all of these. But I also want to make sure it's of interest to you. Like, are there certain ones that you have an interest in and we're not simply just.
All of these are interesting to me. I really love
I believe it's
I wouldn't mind taking the food as an alternate, given that you're going to be there most of the time, because I'm the primary on one.
Okay.
And I want to urge everybody, go to Region Forward meetings. I'm still going to go to Region Forward meetings. They're really good.
We have that noted? Is that?
Do I have to second that?
I'm gonna have to review the video.
It's late, I know. Okay. I can also try to write it out, Benita. Okay. So I can reiterate again, alternate for TPB, Emmett Jordan, alternate for Air Quality Committee, Amy Niesel, primary Region Forward Coalition, Amy Niesel, primary for SEPC, Amy Niesel, alternate Jenny Pompey, and alternate for Food and Agricultural Regional Member Policy Committee, Emmett Jordan.
I'll second that. Okay, so we've discussed that, and this is really a council discussion about what we would like to do with our time to try and represent Greenbelt. So we're going to take a public comment, but I just want to frame that, and we're talking about how we can spend our time doing this. So public comment, we always listen, but it's our decision. Mr. Orleans.
Thank you, Bill Orleans still. Since I've not seen a hard copy of this, I don't know what that second column is supposed to be, but I see with regard to, okay, now I know, thank you very much, the 2023 appointment. I was curious to see who, it's clear to me. The 24 appointment is Kristen Weaver for TPB, and the alternate is not Rodney Roberts, it's Emmett Jordan? Is that what's being proposed?
Correct.
Yes. I would urge however many members of council we have, and unfortunately for the last 15 years, we've had 7 members of council. But I would encourage all of our members of city council to avail themselves of every opportunity to participate in COG. Here I'm going to sound very much like Jay Davis and Emmett Jordan. I apologize to myself for that. But it is a good opportunity for members of council to expand their horizons somewhat. With regard to the Transportation Planning Board, it's unique as a policy committee at COG. The Transportation Planning Board is the Metropolitan Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO. It exists outside of COG. It's staffed by COG staff, but it's not really part of COG. It's separate from COG. And since I've been back in Greenbelt 20 years now and been going to the TPB myself, as well as many of these other COG committees. But since I've been going, Greenbelt has had one member, variously the principal member or alternate, but one member of itself that somewhat inconsistently, but nonetheless, when he did come to the meetings, he's the only member of council, this council, that would engender a debate among the members of the Transportation Planning Board. And that would be a good thing that he did that, not a bad thing. I will tell you that, speaking as one resident, and nobody cares, I resent the fact that at the very minimum, Rodney Roberts is not the alternate to the TPB. I'm inclined to think, whether he likes it or not, he should be the principal member. But having said that, I do look forward to getting a hard copy of this after this meeting. I note that Councilmember McKinney is the principal designated to the Farm Committee. I'm pleased to see that. I'm not certain that I'm pleased to see you on council anymore, but I'm pleased to see that since you're on council, you're a member of the
Yeah, please.
Farm.
Could you wrap it up,
It would
please?
be a very good committee to be on at COG. Some of us who are not on the committee but have tried to involve
Okay.
it with
We're
regard
gonna
to
go ahead
the future
and
of
move
BARC.
on.
I would
It
hope
has been 3
that as you
minutes,
proceed
so,
with, on the
Mr.
Farm Committee,
Orleans,
you involve yourselves with members of
let's,
Save BARC to see
we
how
need-
you can
Thank you so
advantage
much. We
the
need to go
future of
ahead
BARC in
and
your
move
work.
on to the next
Thank you
item
very
on it.
much.
Can we take a vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. So at this time, I believe we're going to go into executive session. We've got some really important matters to talk about. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yep, I move that council go into closed session in accordance with section 3-305B3 and 8 of the general provisions article of the annotated code of the public general laws of Maryland. 1, to consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters related thereto, and 2, to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The purpose of this meeting will be 1, to consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters directly related thereto, and 2, to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. In addition to council, City Manager Sal Marron, Director of Planning Terry Ruby, and representatives from the property owners will be in attendance. Note that council will not return to open session following this closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. McKinney?
Yes.
Ms. Pompey?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Niesel?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Ms. Weaver?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, it's 11:10. Mr. George, thank you so much for your good work. And we're going to clear council chambers and shut down the Zoom. Yeah, let's have a bio break. Is there any